I listened back to the old episodes of us discussing Austria, and my prediction for what was going to happen was wrong. So I'm here to officially fall on my sword. I thought... Okay, so look, all right. I was being pessimistic. I thought it was going to be FPU and UVP again, because they were just going to like talk to the Greens for a bit, and the Greens will be difficult, and they'll be like, oh, the Greens forced us to get back with the fucking SS continuity party. So you made us do it.
The worst possible outcome is always a good bet.
Yeah, right.
So I agree.
But then, now the Greens have done this, and we're talking Austria again, which...
We also didn't expect, though, the Greens perform... First off, Fridays for Future didn't exist yet. Last episode. I mean, it did, but like not to the extent of what it's at now. We didn't expect the European elections then to be that much influence. Like, Europeans have like such a guilty conscience. They're like, damn, I don't know anything about this, but there's a party that has the word green in its name, so I guess I'm going to vote for them. And so don't feel so bad.
I was really surprised by the election results, actually. I was first and foremost surprised at how poorly the FPÖ did. Pleasantly surprised. I expected the Greens to do reasonably well, but they outperformed my expectations. And I was also surprised at the fact that a coalition between the Greens and the ÖVP ended up coming together, because I really thought that, and we can get into this more later, but the ÖVP managed to be so successful in 2017, which was kind of their first breakthrough, because their new leader, Sebastian Kurz, had successfully transformed the party into basically a right populist formation. And I thought in order to be electorally successful and sort of maintain that right populist credibility, he would have to make a coalition with, the far right, rather than risk losing that by making a coalition with the Greens. But I guess I was wrong in that. So,
well, he could only have done it by the unofficial campaign slogan of "Schwarz macht geil," because what is better than Austria's version of Blacked.com?
That's what I think it is. That has to be what it... How is it not that?
Did you know that they were going around in like the Geilo-Mobil and shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, what the fuck?
I love how you know this without seeing the video.
I know.
Like, you just know this from like word of mouth of like, look at how fucking insane Austria
I'm
is.
German, so I know.
There was just a day like earlier this decade or last decade or whatever where like Yulia looks at the news on her phone and is like, that's stupid, and then went about her day, probably.
Oh, Austria. Now, like, because, Adam, you have a theory about Austria that, like, everything's, like 5 years ahead in terms of racism in Austria.
the most important timeline in the German-speaking world.
Does it also go with horniness? Like, is this also... I
important
know
question.
that that's not really technically... if you want to translate it properly, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. But it was very much implied. It was just like big-tittied women in the Geilo-mobile.
yeah, I don't know.
And they were all wearing black.
Yeah,
What do I expect from Sebastian Kurz?
I would have to think if there's an equivalent thirst trap in German politics to Sebastian Kurz. And I really don't. So before we started recording, we were talking about Christian Lindner a little bit. He's also trying to do this sort of strongman posturing thing. He's like sort of a vaguely young guy. He's like vaguely good looking, in sort of a very like bland and plain way.
Squint hard enough.
I like how we talk.
It's
politics,
like a combination
of
of
becomes completely different.
What's that?
The bar becomes completely different when we talk about politics, both in terms of what is considered young and good looking. There's kind of young. It's like, I think he's approaching his 50s.
He's kind of sexy. Christian Lindner's only sexy if you're just like
in the Bundestag.
Yeah, you have to be like look at him sideways. And, like,
just because of that like black and white photo he has on those like
on his Twitter.
And on the posters with a little pink and a bit
sharp contrast.
So like Christian Lindner's whole thing will then be, if it's black and white photos, he's a little bit classier. He's not, coke parties and orgies.
You don't
really,
know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to agree with that. I think I don't know.
No, I know Christian Lindner's notorious. Like he's a notorious coke addict.
No, you know what it is? Wait, since we're talking about cocaine, I feel like you all know the movie American Psycho, of course, right? The Christian Bale character in that movie.
A good movie about doing business things.
Yeah, sure. A movie about doing business things, or The Wolf of Wall Street. It's kind of like the contemporary recapitulation of that. I feel like
a bunch of good guys.
I feel like both Sebastian Kurz and Christian Lindner are kind of like different variations on this same archetype of the Christian Bale. Christian Bale. The Christian Bale.
It's all the Christians.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio.
I guess that's what you do when you're the kind of guy, you're into finance and stuff like that, and you're kind of young and successful.
Neither one of them did that, though.
Yeah, you're young and successful and you fuck. Yeah. No, I think it's a good sort of microcosm of what neoliberalism, the kind of subjectivity that neoliberalism produces, like what is sexy becomes this like finance macha type, this like finance bro, with with like slicked back hair, with like the super high cheekbones in the case of Lindner, and just like what's sexiness becomes equated with like competence. Not just like competence, but like the German word like competence for like business competency. I don't know. I just feel like that's such a good sort of encapsulation of how neoliberalism affects us on sort of the level of what we find appealing, or
I really, this is definitely, I've read a fair amount. I haven't. I know some things about neoliberalism, and this is definitely the worst I've ever heard about it. Neoliberalism telling me what to find horny, which, why can't we go back to what it was as nature intended, which was a naked anime girl? That's what it is. None of this finance competence, no. Classic, good old-fashioned Japanese drawings.
Actually, when we're talking about like having a German equivalent of the Geilo-Mobil, actually, when you
it's my car outside.
No, but when you look into the campaign of the Junge Union, you actually had a very similar slogan to that, and they actually had posters like that. So they had like half naked because they had to wear something black, of course, to prove the point. So it was half naked women on a poster saying like, "Yeah, Junge Union," or Schwarz macht geil. I don't know, same shit.
I really like the lazy equivalent of Schwarz macht geil. I was just like, we didn't even try. So what's the slogan? Yeah, and then the party's name.
So it's the same logic as those Parship ads. Like, there's a hot person, they're not on the app, but you should do that.
It's basically Elite partner, but hornier. So.
Nice.
So
the
comparison I keep coming back to, then we can. Is that we kind of alluded to this in our last episode, but like Kurz and Lindner are like two sons in the family, and Kurz, and if you look at the German media, they're like, he's so amazing, he's so successful. Why can't we be like that? And then they just turn to Christian Lindner and be like, why can't you be more like your older brother Sebastian, or younger brother? I would say.
No, he's definitely the older brother in this scenario. Age doesn't actually matter.
Why don't you do anything with your life? Your brother is off there being Chancellor of Austria. What are you doing?
Actually, I think Germany shouldn't get inspired by Austria.
Yeah, well,
no. Every time we've done it in the past, it's been great.
Your brother, successfully sidelined the right-wing party and took over their base and, solidified power. Why can't you do that, Christian?
Hey. Welcome to your weekly Corner Späti. We have the full gang here. Myself, Nick.
Kieran wanted to cut me off. Julia.
I was trying to be sexist. You won't let me. It's Kieran.
Sorry.
Hi, Rob here.
Not being sexist.
And we have a special guest all the way from one of the moons of Germany.
Yes.
The mountain moon of Austria. I was thinking the forest moon of Endor, but...
Yeah, what? That's the whole Star Wars thing of like planets with like single biomes.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
I really like the idea that there's a grass planet and it's just flat grass as far as the eye can see.
That actually exists in the Star Wars universe, but nonetheless.
Okay.
Yeah, can we actually introduce our guest?
Yeah, exactly.
We have Adam Baltner from, how do I pronounce the magazine in proper Austrian context? MOSAIC?
Very good. MOSAIC. Very good.
Oh,
That's
thank you,
what I
Yulia.
Look at you speaking German over here.
Yeah, we are here to long-awaited Austrian episode. We promised it. We love talking about Austria on the podcast, as longtime listeners know.
It's my favorite German-speaking country. It's the most buck wild one.
Hang on, we really haven't looked at Switzerland close enough yet, but let's...
True.
That's like only a fourth, technically, and their German's not even really... Like, CIARÁN, you can barely understand actual German.
Yeah. I'm very excited to handle dish fights, but all right.
And
We're doing Austria.
we love relating Austrian politics to German politics and the bizarro relations between the two.
And then also the wider world, because a lot of people who listen to the podcast aren't German.
To give, for the Germans, to give them an analogy they'd understand, it's like homeopathy. Because Austria is less dense, so it's more diluted, and therefore the German energy is stronger
I don't understand.
and comes out. I think that's how homeopathy works.
Yeah, so my whole character for this show, for this episode, is going to be like, I have done the most ridiculously surface level research on Austria. All right, going into character now. Guys, they say Grüß Gott over there?
They also say it in Bavaria, though, too.
Wild. That's the end of my research.
Austria, as you may know, has actually 9 federal states. And the one to the furthest, I moved to Austria in 2013 from the United States. And when I first moved to Austria, I spent a year living in Vorarlberg, which is the westernmost state of Austria on the border of Switzerland. And unlike the other 8 states in Austria, Vorarlberg actually doesn't speak a dialect of Austro-Bavarian. It speaks a kind of German that's actually closer to Swiss German. And they don't say...
Oh, no.
I mean, they say Grüß Gott as well. But when people greet each other, there's actually another word that they use, which is quite shocking to most people in the German-speaking world, particularly
it's the N-word.
Particularly in Germany. They say Heil or Heile.
Nice. The dream is alive and well in the Alps, I guess.
All right, I'm cutting us off before we go any further because we have a lot to talk about today. We are going to talk about the Austrian election. Adam's going to fill us in on everything that's been happening. For those who don't know, there's the ÖVP, the center-right party, or maybe a little more right than center, right with a little side of center. And the Green Party have entered into coalition, and there's some talk about what this means for the future of Europe or Austria or what have you. So to get started, the last time we talked about Austria was right after the probably well-known by now Ibiza affair. Cue the Avicii.
I legitimately forgot about that. I mean, I think
So did all the
Austria also.
voters.
So did Austria. Austria completely forgot about that as well. With clearly,
And at that moment in time, we pointed out that Kurz immediately went up in the polls, and that if you looked at the election was still several months away, but there was kind of hope in the air. There was Thursday demonstrations, right? The Venga Boys were, giving concerts in Vienna. And now, several months later, we have Kurz and his ÖVP party back with a higher result than last time, and into a coalition with the Greens. So, Adam, how did we get from the happy times of the Venga Boys to now?
Yeah, so maybe I should, just to rewind a little bit, we should talk a little bit about what exactly happened that led to the Venga Boys even coming to perform in Austria in the first place. So I know you already did an episode about this, but just a brief recap. On May 17th, a video was leaked showing the then Vice Chancellor of Austria, a guy named H.C. Strache or HC Strache of the Far-Right Freedom Party.
That's his DJ name in Ibiza.
Yeah. He was on vacation in Ibiza with one of his party colleagues, a guy named Johann Gudenus, who was, sort of one of his closest confidants. And they were meeting with somebody who was pretending to be somebody who was allegedly a Russian heiress, and negotiating a deal for her to buy the most important and the biggest newspaper in Austria in order to boost the FPÖ's political profile, basically during elections, and to do campaign work, basically media campaign work for them.
I forgot how much I love this scandal.
Yeah. So that was part of what they discussed. Another part of what they discussed was a strategy to circumvent Austria campaign finance laws. So unlike the United States, which is where I come from, Austria has fairly stringent laws about campaign financing, how much people can how many donations people can spend, and there are laws prohibiting things such as sort of slush funds. In the United States, you would call them super PACs, where people can just kind of dump infinite amounts of money that then campaigns have sort of backdoor access to. They were kind of conspiring to set up one of these big slush funds that would sort of be off the books of the official electoral. Basically the electoral commission wouldn't see it, and this video was leaked. And the very next day, on the 18th, which was May 18th, 2019, which was a Saturday, HC Strache gives a big speech at midday, and at the end of the speech, he resigned. Basically, it was a long apologia, which lasted about 15 minutes. And at the very end, he's like, "But I made mistakes. He mostly talked about how he felt really bad for flirting with this oligarch, and he apologized. He apologized to his wife, and then he resigned.
Such a horny mistake.
Adam, not to interrupt, but I remember he was like, "She was really hot. I'm sorry. What are you going to do?"
That is actually exactly what he said. Okay, so that happened.
Was he like chugging Red Bull and doing Coke the same time? And of all this, I remember that
that doesn't sound healthy for your heart.
But very Austrian.
Yeah, of course.
Red Bull, yeah.
I just love the how that video was filmed in 2015, I think, or something like that.
They were sitting on it for ages.
Yeah,
it was exactly. It was filmed in 27 I believe August 2017 during their summer vacation. HC Strache and Johann Gudenus' summer vacation.
Of course, during the summer vacation.
Yeah, but that video looked like it was from 1984 or something like that. It was in the shittiest quality I've ever. Come on.
It was probably like a phone camera.
It does not
Like
exactly.
that.
My phone is 170
oh my
megapixels.
God, just because you have a Chinese phone.
Yeah, exactly. What kind of shitty phone are they?
Would it surprise you to learn that maybe Strache isn't on the cutting edge of design and fashion and taste?
No, of course not. He's in Ibiza.
Ibiza. I love Ibiza as the place as well, because I feel like that's 3 southern Spanish destinations ago. There's a reason there's a Venga Boy song about it.
Yeah.
And not an Avicii song about it.
Yeah.
I feel even Avicii's quite outdated.
So to continue a little bit with the story, just so I don't take up too much time, a week later, so Strache resigned the day after this video came out, and then the next week, the entire FPÖ, all of the FPÖ members of Sebastian Kurz's cabinet, of his government, so all of the FPÖ ministers resigned. And I don't know if I said this already. The FPÖ is the far right party in Austria.
Yes.
They, are kind of like the AfD in Deutschland. Like the AfD in Germany. And the reason that all of the ministers resigned is because Sebastian Kurz gave an ultimatum to Herbert Kickl, who was the Ministry of the Interior, also an FPÖ minister, and easily the most controversial figure in the FPÖ besides Strache, who was the leader of the party. And Kickl is mainly controversial because of his well-known ties to the extra-parliamentary far-right organizations like the Identitären and so on and so forth. I guess the best German analogy would probably be somebody like Hecke, in Thüringen. So Björn Höcke Björn Höcke. What's his name again?
No one knows his name, actually.
Höcke? I don't know.
It's Bernd.
Bernd, Björn.
No, it's Björn. Yeah.
I think.
Which one is it? Is it Bernd or Björn?
No, it's Björn, but
It's Björn.
Bernd is the first name.
You say Bernd to
everyone
try.
Oh crap. Anyway.
Oh, I literally thought that was his
Got
name.
him.
German humor, knee slappers is all around.
You can cut that out.
Leave it in.
Yep.
And basically, Kurz saw this as an opportunity to kick out this some of the most controversial elements of the FPÖ from his government, and he's an extremely important person to the FPÖ. He used to be the leader of the FPÖ's Bildungsakademie. That's like the party foundation that's in charge of basically political education and stuff like that.
Sounds bad.
They're like think tanks in the
Yeah,
US.
the party think
they're like
yeah.
the Stiftung in Germany.
Yeah.
So you can think of him as like the chief kind of political strategist and quite frankly conspiracy theorist of the FPÖ.
Nice.
Yeah.
King
and when he was forced to resign, when he was forced out by Kurz, all of the FPÖ members resigned in solidarity. All of the FPÖ ministers resigned in solidarity with Kurz.
In solidarity.
In solidarity with their racist with their racist leader, not leader, but
Their fallen, horny.
the racist thought leader, I should say.
Yeah.
And then
I never thought that meme of like that like leftist sticker that says "Follow your leader" and it's a picture of him. It would actually work, but it worked, I guess. We should put more of those
Actually,
up.
I remember like them being very empört in the German sense of empört about like that he resigned and that he had to resign and stuff like that. I don't remember exactly, but
yeah. And after this dust up, the FPÖ said that they wanted a parliamentary vote of no confidence on Kurz, on Sebastian Kurz, and surprisingly, the SPÖ, so the Social Democrats in Austria, who had been doing fairly weak opposition work up to this point, decided to join the FPÖ in voting for a vote of no confidence in Parliament against Kurz, and this happened 10 days after. This happened on May 28th, so 10 days after the resignation of HC Strache, the FPÖ leader. And after that, Kurz was no longer the Austrian chancellor. He was replaced by an interim chancellor, and an election date was set for September 29th. And the left, not just the left, but much of Austrian society was really euphoric after the scandal with the FPÖ vote. The Ibiza-Gate scandal came out because people rightfully perceived the FPÖ as a massive threat to democratic rights. I mean, not just to leftists, and not just to people, particularly on the margins in society, immigrants, but really to the democratic character of the state. I think it's important to, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but that FPÖ's long game is a transformation of the state, and not necessarily in a way that would make it not a democracy, at least formally anymore, but in a way that would push it maybe in the direction of Orban's Hungary. Okay, so setting that aside,
Ungarn, Österreich.
Again,
Again,
right. But people are making a lot of.
But then it's interesting.
Yeah.
Then it's interesting that they still elected them for the EU, didn't they? Like the FPÖ got
a couple of seats. Austria doesn't have a huge amount of seats in the EU. It's like something like 13. I think it's comparable to Ireland.
FPÖ got some of that.
Yeah. It did,
that was after the Ibiza video.
If I remember correctly, I think the FPÖ got. I think they got 17% in the European election. I might be wrong about that. It was around there. But they didn't go down by that. I mean, they had gotten 26% in the general election in 2017, and then they still did relatively well in the EU election, which was only a few weeks later. And I think this had a lot to do with, it may have been even higher. It may have been 20%. Anyway, we can look this up later. But the way that the FPÖ resigned, sort of the way that they kind of all rage resigned together, I think had the effect of really firing up their base and getting a lot of sort of FPÖ voters to turn out. And, normally an EU election isn't really the FPÖ's, the FPÖ has historically been a Eurosceptic party. Although, then again, I mean, you did see a lot of Eurosceptic parties actually doing quite well in the EU election. I mean, look at the Brexit party in the UK. They weren't really hurt as much as one may have expected in the EU election. And they actually did a lot worse in the general election in September. And I think that this has to do with other scandals that happened between Ibiza-gate and the general election, which had a more demobilizing effect on the FPÖ's base, which we can talk a little bit more about maybe later if you want.
Yeah, we can get into them now. I just want to clarify. Yeah. So the Ibiza affair, everyone was cool with that. They were like, that's fine.
I mean, this is literally the most German, and when I mean German, I mean like German culture of the language,
going to Ibiza?
Whatever. Going to Ibiza,
quoting the Wenger boys,
partying, a little bit too much, making backroom deals with the Russian heiress. Like that's normal.
Well, that's aspirational.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, God, I wish I could be like offering a Russian heiress.
Exactly. You just kind of like wish that you were like Gerhard Schröder at that time. Like, why am I not? Why do I not have Vladimir Putin on speed dial? Like, why am I not being offered a seat at Gazprom?
In the U.S., there's a meme of the doomer Wojciech, and he's smoking and talking to a pretty goth girl. And in Austria, the equivalent is like they just dream that they could be someone like Strache talking to a Russian heiress, drinking 3 Red Bulls at the same time and being like, do you want to buy the Austrian fisheries department, please, anything.
It's actually not too far off.
Ski lifts, we can name our ski lifts after you.
Yeah.
You can run all of them. So what are these other scandals that the FPÖ that afflicted the FPÖ?
Yeah, because the my understanding of the numbers was that like I have them here now. The actual Ibiza scandal had very little impact on like people's voting decision. I think like no party got 50% of people who voted for no party said more than 50% said that, hey, the reason I'm voting for this party is because of the Ibiza affair.
Yeah, I think that tracks. That definitely sounds about right to me. The main effect of the Ibiza scandal was just to destroy the government and make it so that there would be a snap election, which shouldn't be underestimated because. Okay, so from the time that the coalition between the FPÖ and the ÖVP, so the center and the far right, was sworn in January 2018, until the Ibiza scandal happened, the government had very high approval ratings and very stable approval ratings, and it really looked like they were going to be in power for a decade, if not longer. And people were just, really in despair. I mean, liberals, leftists, obviously, possibly even some people in the orbit of, the center right, who, don't really identify with the FPÖ. But yeah, I mean, just this thing that kind of came out of nowhere and blindsided everybody, took down a government and destroyed a coalition, which, doesn't exist anymore. So that's actually pretty huge. But I definitely don't think that that was the main reason that the FPÖ had a relatively weak electoral performance in September. The main reason is basically a money embezzlement scandal came out around the leader of the party, Strache, who was also at the center of the Ibiza scandal. And it came out that Strache had been using official party funds for basically to enrich himself, using it, on vacation, using it to, for his own enrichment.
To rack a high score in Clash of Clans.
Exactly. Yeah. In December, an article came out that said Strache had been using party funds to buy, I guess, I'm not a gamer, upgrades in Clash of Clans or something.
Yeah.
But he'd spent tens of thousands of euro on Clash of Clans.
He's literally like your 7-year-old that you're like need to have the parental lock on the app so that it's inside the apps.
Exactly. So
I know that people actually play these games. That's the thing that
they get Super Bowl ads. This is
I
where the
gotta
money
say
comes
that-
from.
I
It's
know
from the
that.
Austrian
isn't this the
Man,
game that
man
you
of the
see
people.
like advertised to you when you're scrolling through Instagram?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
It seems like kind of basic.
It's not the one. It's not the one who got the. What's that blonde model in the States? She was like the face of like.
Yeah,
one of
it
these
was
apps.
Kate Upton.
Kate Upton was like the face
Wait,
of one
what?
of these kind of apps for
Yeah.
ages. Yeah.
Well, I'm
I
a
missed stuff.
But he does seem like the kind of person who makes like horny mistakes, Straka. So
He's like, if I get enough points, if I spend enough money,
Upton's
I
not
get
a-
Kate Upton. I am, you know
with
what?
that Russian heiress, but I could do it with Kate Upton.
Yeah, sorry. I got to stick true to last week. Was it last week? Yeah. Fuck Clash of Clans. I'm a World of Tanks kind of guy.
Word of Tanks. Yeah, I was about to mention that. Just
A
now.
fine Belarusian game. Go on, Adam. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Interestingly, I'm not even okay. I think this had some effect on the FPÖ's turnout. So the FPÖ has successfully managed to capture, a portion of people on the margins of society who the state has really underserved and neglected, and I think it's probably reasonable to think that some of those people looked at the scandals around Strache and thought, here's a guy who says that he's fighting for den kleinen Mann, yeah, he's fighting for the little guy, and clearly this is bullshit because he's just using the party money
The people in his Clash of Clans game.
to enrich himself, right? But I think a lot of people. Okay, so after this scandal came out, the FPÖ obviously had to, depose Strache as the leader. I think Strache actually stepped down from the leadership before that, after the Ibiza scandal came out, but they actually had to kick him out of the party. And after Strache's expulsion from the party, I mean, in spite of everything, in spite of all the scandals, he was an incredibly popular figure, just because of all the things that you've kind of alluded to now, like, kind of this. I mean, he's like this plain-spoken, like Red Bull swigging, like very sort of. He's like a vulgarian in a. I feel like it's maybe a little bit too easy to compare him with Trump, because there are a lot of differences. I mean, he wasn't born. He didn't inherit millions of dollars from his dad or whatever. But just kind of this vulgar attitude, I think, had sort of an organic appeal amongst a lot of people, and he was a genuinely popular figure. So I think the fact that
He's your cool racist uncle.
Now it's like this thing, like, oh, he says it like it is.
Exactly, he says it like it is.
He's your cool racist uncle.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that he got booted from the party actually probably hurt the party. But more than anything, I think the thing that hurt the FPÖ was the image of incompetence that the party projected amidst all of these scandals. And this image of incompetence directly contradicts with the idea of the strongman. I think, the strongman is somebody who's super competent, who can get things done. And yeah, the FPÖ just looked like a shit show to basically everybody for different reasons to different people. But at the end of the day, this had like a big demobilization effect on the party. So a lot of people ended up staying home. About 100,000 voters who voted for the FPÖ in 2017 didn't vote for them in 2019, and about 100,000 ended up voting for Sebastian Kurz. And I think this is super interesting because Sebastian Kurz. So maybe I'll try to keep this brief, but Sebastian Kurz, he came to prominence in the ÖVP as the leader of the Junge ÖVP, so the youth organization of the ÖVP, and then he served as the, I think, Minister of Integration, ironically enough. And he had kind of a reputation of
get in the Galemobile.
I mean, there are a few interesting sound bites of him in interviews from like 2010, 2011, where he says things against Headscarf Ban. He speaks out against the FPÖ's sort of the racist things that the FPÖ was doing against Muslims. Sort of this thing where the FPÖ was trying to institute a headscarf ban, which obviously directly disadvantages Muslim women. The state telling them what they can and can't wear in a way that affects them. But yeah, so Quotes was integration minister under one of the Grand Coalition governments, and then he was minister of he was also minister, so foreign minister or secretary of state, I guess you would say for the Americans who are listening. And as secretary of state, you see his profile really start to rise in the party, and this comes at a time when the FPÖ is also doing really well in the polls, and the FPÖ is actually leading in the polls in Austria for the span of about, I want to say, a year and a half, from about 2015, around the time of the quote unquote refugee crisis, in the fall when a lot of refugees were in the news coming to Europe. And this only changed when Sebastian Kurz became the leader of the ÖVP in 2017, right before the general election. And Kurz, during 2016, sort of made a name for himself in his role as the minister of in his role as foreign minister, by notoriously being one of the main architects of the closing of the Balkan route. So I don't know if that rings any bells for you all, but one of the main ways that refugees from Syria and from other places in the Middle East were traveling to Europe up until 2016 was through the Balkans, and this is referred to as the Balkan route. And it's obviously a lot safer than trying to cross. I mean, it's not particularly safe, but it's safer than trying to cross over the Mediterranean for obvious reasons. And Kurz sort of likes to be he likes to say that he's responsible for closing the Balkan route. And there's a lot of truth to this. He led a push for massive militarization of a lot of Austria's exterior borders. So he cut deals with other governments, Balkan governments, with Hungary, and basically pay them off to beef up their border securitization, to make it harder for refugees to reach Austria and to reach Europe that way. And that was a massive that really boosted his political profile and made him a very popular figure. And then when he took over the ÖVP, which is the traditional party of the center right in Germany, it would be the equivalent of the CDU, the Christian Conservatives. He effectively transformed the ÖVP into a right populist vehicle. So he, his platform in 2017 was identical to, or very similar at least, to the platform that the FPÖ had in terms of immigration, sort of a hardliner anti-immigration line, coupled with hardline neoliberalism. Gifts to major industry donors and stuff like that. But basically, what I to try to circle back here and make my point, Kurz has transformed the ÖVP into something like the FPÖ has been for a long time. But he has managed to project this sort of era of competence and ability to get things done in a way that the FPÖ clearly failed to do with all the scandals in the last year. So that's why you see a lot of FPÖ voters either not voting at all or voting for the ÖVP, for the competent authoritarian.
Yeah.
Actually, I think he got that a lot, like around Europe. You see that in Greece right now with like Golden Dawn losing a lot of voters to Neo Democracia. Because of this, because they radiate like competence and So if you have an already established right wing, very right wing, or which is considered as, or call themselves this center right or something, but they kind of follow the same, the same direction. They kind of are very far on the right, but they are very established. So a lot of the voters migrate again from this. They used to vote very far right, like something like FPÖ or something like Golden Dawn, and now if you have a party like that in power, you can migrate back to that party because they are so on the right that they are not to be considered center anymore.
Yeah, similar thing happened with there was the collapse of Partido Popular in Spain, and everyone was like, oh, Vox, the neo-Franquismo party, they're stealing all their votes, but most of it was actually the supposedly centrist Ciudadanos party, because they had moved so far right in kind of like response to Catalonia.
Yeah.
That they became very authoritarian, very police apologia kind of like authoritarian party, that they took in all the like Franco cranks in Spain.
Wow. Or I mean, I think we could even maybe start to see something similar happening in the UK with the Tories under Johnson. I mean, it's kind of too early to say how that's going to pan out. But at least in the days after the election, there were all these, I mean, again, it's kind of anecdotal Twitter stuff, but stuff about, notorious far-right figures in the UK who had just decided to join the Tories, to become members after the election, which...
Oh, Yaxley Lennon did that.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Yeah,
Tommy Robinson. I keep forgetting his fake name, but Tommy Robinson, that's it, yeah. I would 100% agree with that. I think that's exactly what happened in the UK. Like, Boris Johnson is just this completely different figure that appealed to the far right compared to Theresa May and definitely David Cameron. Like,
I do not get it with Boris Johnson. I think I can understand why people would vote for Trump significantly more than Boris Johnson. I've said this probably multiple times on the show, but I mean, he's the most disgusting looking person on the face of the earth.
I think we accidentally came upon it like a couple of weeks ago, but he does remind me of Mr. Blobby, which was like this children's...
Yeah, you told me that.
Figure on children's television in the UK. He just reminds us of all the things we saw as a child. It's basically...
That's why.
Yeah.
So, Adam, would you say, like, how well does Kurz fit this role? Like, could someone, like, is he the best that the far right in Austria has, so they'll deal with him? But could someone from the FPÖ, like, is there a purer figure that could come up on the horizon, or is Kurz like, yeah, okay, he's more alpha than Strache, so I'm going to vote for him? Strache just didn't look cool enough when he was selling off every single publicly owned thing in Austria, but Kurz makes it look cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if, to my knowledge, there's nobody on the horizon who's there's nobody with the sort of the profile and the level of political talent on the horizon in sort of the FPÖ Umfeld, in the FPÖ sort of environment. But I mean, that doesn't mean they don't exist. I mean, when people think about the far right in Austria and young people, and this is kind of horrifying, they tend to think about the Identitären Bewegung, which is, a far right extra parliamentary organization, and their leader Martin Sellner, who, I mean, I guess he would kind of be a parallel to Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson in the UK, but he's a lot younger and also a lot more.
He's like, what's his name in the
He's
US
a lot more
too,
polished and better spoken. He's like Richard Spencer. That's actually a better analogy. He's like Spencer.
This is a terrifying recurring thing that I'm noticing with Austria, is they have all these like comparable far right figures, but they'll live longer because they're already younger. That's the great thing that I'm learning. Is Kurz, there's this guy.
Yeah. I mean,
not to dwell on the point. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
No, it's not that important. I think Senna is a lot more serious than Richard Spencer. Like, he has more of a, I don't know, he seems to be more of a competent far right organizer, whereas Spencer seems like kind of a objective.
Well, Spencer already blacklisted himself because he was a Nazi the whole time, just like an outspoken neo-Nazi.
And he also just walks around being like, "Stop talking about sports ball. This is a speech."
Yeah,
he has this weird.
Idiot.
Yeah, and the difference is that Spencer tries to be like this. I mean, he kind of tries to be like this. What's that ridiculous American magazine? The William F. Buckley one. What's it called?
National Review.
National Review. Thank you. He tries to be like a National Review, like pipe smoking, tweed wearing, arrogant intellectual asshole, and like that just doesn't really play well with like the young generation, I think. But Zelna is much more sort of media savvy in this way, at appealing to youngsters, and I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, I think that is the dangerous thing about the Identitären is because they are actually kind of like educated intellectuals and stuff like that. And there is this weird thing with like Antideutsche in Germany that are actually that he made a YouTube video about like how he agrees with points of the Antideutsche.
Yeah, I mean that shouldn't surprise anybody with a brain.
Yeah, I know, and how they keep like German culture alive. So it's like all this talk about Adorno and stuff like that, and some other like very German intellectuals and praising
Adorno
this.
Just fits into any box, doesn't he?
Literally, he does. That's the point of critical theory.
So
sorry to interrupt you, Julia. I just want to say, Richard Spencer used to be a grad student, I believe, at University of Virginia or Duke or something.
And he did his master's on Adorno.
He did?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it was at Duke, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of these southern universities. I don't know.
Where does Duke's university sound like it's a university for that kind of person? I don't know.
That's pretty sad. The only two things that I associate with Duke University is Richard Spencer and the lacrosse rape scandal.
Yep.
Sterling record.
Okay, so not to keep dwelling on this point, but what is the relationship between Kurz and the Identitäre Bewegung? Is Kurz is he a cuck? Is he like not all the way there? Because he seems quite flexible. And
I don't want to pump him up. I don't want to overinflate like what they've actually accomplished, quote unquote.
Good, because he's guessing.
But I mean, I'm trying to think of like a left wing comparison, and I mean, he kind of is like the AOC of the far right or something, or like he's like an international figure, like you know how like leftists all over the world celebrate AOC now because they're like, here's a person putting her ideas out there into the public sphere, and challenging the establishment, regardless of how you feel about individual positions she's taken on certain questions or whatever. It's like sort of our champion who's getting her ideas out there. I feel like Selna may occupy a similar position actually internationally.
Mm-hmm.
No, but what do his feet look like? You don't know this thing about how like the right in the U.S. whenever they draw AOC, it's always like some foot fetish thing.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Oh shit! I missed out on that, and I'm glad I did.
We'll show you later. Don't worry.
My God!
Anything else you want to ask on that?
No.
I feel like accidentally.
Wait.
I feel like after I accidentally showed Yulia Blacked.com
earlier
this week, I think we should protect her innocence for just another week at least.
I don't want to say something.
Oh, sorry. Just to answer Rob's question, like, what's their so there's no relationship between Kurz and the Identitären. There is a relationship between the FPÖ and the Identitären, which is and we should actually start talking about the Greens soon. This is a reason that it's objectively very good that the FPÖ is no longer in government, and that a guy who has a more or less known relationship with the extra parliamentary right is no longer the Ministry of the Interior, the guy in charge of the police in the country. So I'll criticize the Greens for a lot, but I'm kind of glad that well, we can talk more about how it would have been bad either way had it been another far right coalition or this right green coalition or center right green coalition. But I'll just leave it at that.
Before we get to the Greens, I just want to go through a few checks. So, what is the SPÖ doing during all of this? Where
nothing.
Just
Not
get that on the
much,
record.
actually.
They're having a normal one like the SPD. They're just falling apart like before your eyes.
Joining other people on like the like a vote of mistrust. Or what
Vote of
is
no
it?
confidence.
No confidence. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean,
so
like,
after
So they're not very. Yeah.
after the vote of no confidence, the SPÖ, so the Social Democrats, ran an incredibly weak electoral campaign, which actually was similar to the 2017 campaign insofar as most of the campaign focused on their leader and the personality of their leader, who's a woman named Pamela Rendi-Wagner, and
You're making these names up.
yeah, right. I'm trying to remember what their election saying was. Oh man, it was something extremely sort of banal and feel good banality. Their posters all had a heart, and Pamela.
It was probably like yay.
Their posters had a heart and it had Menschlichkeit. That's what it was. Their slogan was Menschlichkeit, which means, I mean, actually, if you translate it into English, it kind of sounds good. I guess it translates to humanity, but it also sort of translates to. Julia, maybe you could help me out here. What's a good translation for Menschlichkeit?
Yeah, something like being.
It means being nice. It means being a nice person.
No, being humane.
Being humane.
You know,
Humane,
to a
okay.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Being
like being
nice.
humane,
It-
being nice. Yeah.
They gotta leave the.
Doesn't mean
It means
black
being
people.
kind. I would say it's more like being
Yeah.
kind than
Yeah.
It's more like kindness than humanity. Humanity sounds like philosophical, like Marxist
Yeah.
I mean,
humanism.
humane would fit it. So not human, but humane. So like,
They gotta leave the one-word campaign slogans just to the FDP.
Yeah.
Sorry, Digitalisierung really rolls off the tongue.
it's like first digitalization, then we think about it. That's still my favorite
King
poster.
shit. That's the best.
So-
one.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you bring that up, Adam, with the I don't know, cult of personality around this one, or like an emphasis around this
A super friendly
SPÖ leader.
super friendly, super well-spoken, nice professional woman. That's it. She seems nice. I mean, nothing against her.
Yeah. It reminds me of the 2017 election in Germany, actually, because I don't know if you guys remember, but when Martin Schulz was running for the SPD, it was a big thing like, here's the guy. I don't know if you remember, a Reddit was created called The Schulz.
Yeah, you had,
oh my god,
you had
That
more
was-
memes than
That's still
content.
going, and it's very upsetting.
I just pulled up on my phone.
Yeah,
so
the
I'll
thing
just
is, you had
show
more,
the room.
Yeah, you had more memes than content. So
Well,
it was just like believing in him as a figure that comes like from the EU, and he was doing quite well in the EU. So now
one of
he's
the weird things that he kept doing during the campaign was
Yeah.
all his policy positions were things the GroKo had already done.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
Mirko would just be like,
yeah.
"We already did that." What are
And
you
he always
talking
kept
about?"
harping on the fact that he was a recovering alcoholic.
oh yeah.
That is very relatable to the German public.
It is, but still, like my
You should have said I'm still an alcoholic.
Recovering.
if you wanted to relate.
my mom legitimately sent me an article about him because that was the thing that I guess appealed to
It's
Americans
interesting
the most is that they managed to get a former alcoholic to become the
Actually, I
head of
think
a
that's
party.
interesting because that is one of the first times I noticed that kind of notion of American kind of campaigning is using that also against him, like an ad hominem argument like that.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
saying
he likes to drink.
He
You
likes to
you
drink.
like to drink
Exactly.
too.
Yeah.
You shouldn't
Yeah.
be president.
Yeah. Wait.
You like alcohol in Germany? Get out!
Well, you can lead Bavaria with that.
Yeah.
Right.
So one more point on this personality-focused campaigning. In 2017, the leader of the Social Democrats was this guy named Christian Kern. Actually, in a lot of ways, very similar to Pamela Rendi-Wagner. Sort of a youngish, sort of good-looking, very professional-seeming guy. Or woman in the case of Rendi-Wagner, and they were sort of celebrated for being responsible and decent and competent, And in the case of Christian Kern, the SPÖ had all of these like online and stuff, but also bumper stickers that said "Yes, we can," like the Obama thing. Yes, we can.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Yes, we can.
On.
And then they brought it back for Randy Wagner. So her name is Pamela, yeah. And they had "Yes, we Pam."
No, that's why they lost.
And I posted about this on
serious.
Twitter in a really snarky way. I was like,
shit.
"What does it say when, what is the takeaway when this historically socialist, even Marxist party, if you go back far enough, a party that built Red Vienna, that built the entire social housing system in Austria, that built the entire social state, is stealing electoral slogans from a neoliberal American president."
I really like the idea of like, yes, welcome to the SPU leadership process. The only thing we require is that somewhere in your name there's just the short "ah" sound, so that we can make the slogan that we paid a lot of money for work. So if your name's Cameron, we can be yes we can. This is great.
What is their opinion? What is their position on triple tap drone strikes?
Well, I mean, I don't even know if we've talked about it on the podcast before, but Germany has a very similar, and I would say German center-left people have a similar relationship to Obama. I mean, if you recall, Obama gave that huge speech before he was even elected in Berlin.
Everyone fucking loves him when you're like the liberal
and
left.
I think it was maybe Die Welt or something. We were reading this, and they're just like Obama, especially internationally or online, what goes viral, or one thing of his that went viral about his personality is the correspondence dinner roasts, and he's like so cool and funny. And there are all these German writers being like, "Oh, I just wish we had someone cool. We just have Merkel. If only we could have someone who's cool, who has
Merkel doesn't
swag."
put up her favorite songs of 2019. One of them being "Shug" by DaBaby, and how I really need to see a video of Obama singing along to that song, because I cannot imagine him being like, "She's like, oh, I smell cologne."
The interesting thing is that the German people even weren't that angry about the NSA scandal because it was Obama doing it. Like, if he listens to me talking to my mom on the phone, talking about planning a terrorist attack.
I was planning to tell him anyway.
Yeah. I share everything with Obama.
You saw you're speaking to Al Qaeda. Don't do that. Really upsets your mom. By the way,
I'm sorry, Obama. I'm sorry. Still love you.
It's funny you bring up the Obama's end of the year list thing. For those who don't know, Obama was like, "Here's all the like books I read this year and music," and he picks all this like cool musicians. Like he watches Parasite, listens to Big Thief.
They're watching Parasite.
He's not somebody doing that for him, like as a publicist.
He absolutely does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is why it's so perfect. It so perfectly captures the Obama phenomenon, because Obama in general,
Obama-non?
represents the fact that
Where was this in 2008?
I didn't have a podcast then. No one did. It was 2008.
like they don't care about the politics so much. They just wish they had a cool or competent, but especially with the sharing the music and books, it's like a cool, relatable, someone who appreciates things, in office. And of course, this has always been a projection from liberals, so they can forget about real politics. They can just trust that there's someone cool there. But what's so perfect about the lists is that it's clear that he's not even cool. Like, he's just paying someone like, you guys want me to like pretend to like this shit? All right, just
at the very least,
I'll give you a couple $1,000, like come up with a list of cool movies and stuff. Like,
and the best, he just asked his daughters.
Exactly.
Free.
I mean, but the Ouroboros says
Obama's favorite TikToks.
it's closed in on itself in the sense that you could assume that Obama, thinking that matters is dumb, but at least he's a cool, interesting person. But he's not. And like the facade is coming off now because he can't keep it up.
This kind of leads me to an interesting question for you, Adam, though, because speaking of like cold personalities and thinking they're cool, is one thing you get from looking at the stats is Kurz has a huge amount of youth support. It's much higher than like any other comparable party, I think, across Europe. I remember watching footage of after the election results came out in September of like the youth gathering, basically the youth wing of the party, like having their kind of like election results come in, which was pretty much everyone I was expecting to see there. These kind of like frog-like young people with glasses. One of them was actually like plugging his own ears because like everyone was cheering around him and he was like concerned it was too loud. Very funny stuff. But what is the kind of like connection there? Is Kurtz appealing to young people in any way similarly to Obama did? Is it a facade? Is it genuine? What's happening there?
Yeah, so
what does Sebastian Kurz's end of the year list look like? Is what we're also trying to ask.
I think both. Yeah, I don't know how. I don't know how strong a parallel I would. Obama would be the first person I would think to compare him with, but because there are a lot of ways in which they're quite different. I mean, but. One thing that's interesting about the Kurtz campaign in both 2017 and 2019 was its emphasis on newness. So when Kurtz remade the ÖVP into kind of the right populist formation, he did so while also simultaneously giving it an overall sort of image freshener. Like he changed the colors of the party from its traditional black to turquoise. He even changed the name of the name of the party as it shows up on the election ballots from the ÖVP to the Neue ÖVP, so the new ÖVP.
Wasn't it also Kurzliste or whatever?
Yeah, so on the ballot it was die Neue ÖVP Liste Kurz. So the new Austrian People's Party, Kurz's list, and all of sort of the imagery on the posters, on the billboards, was all about sort of Zukunft, sort of future, and time for change. So Obama also. I mean, I think this is actually where the comparison really does lend itself to being in which you can really draw a comparison with Obama. So Obama obviously campaigned on hope and change, and Kurtz, I wouldn't necessarily say he campaigned on hope and change, but he campaigned on, I don't know, making Austria sort of fit for the future, changing the out with the old, in with the new. It was definitely a less hopeful message than the Obama message, and sort of a more, I don't know, sort of, I feel like there was always sort of an implicit, there was an implied need that we need somebody really strong who's going to secure us. We need somebody who's really strong and competent who's going to sort of secure the future for us. So I think maybe that's sort of why he resonates with young people, or with certain young people at least. And just more generally, I think, I think in a lot of ways his popularity actually is a reflection of sort of the post-political moment that we're living in, where you can just sort of be like, oh, I'm going to do something new. I'm changing the color of the party. I'm using all this rhetoric that kind of reflects newness or emphasizes newness. And because people, are so depoliticized, because people spend so much time thinking about politics and what politics actually means, and the fact that it actually affects their material well-being, that can actually have some appeal.
Yeah, but it's too traumatic to actually think about, like, oh, there's real politics out there. So, like all of us, you just try to be a stand-up comedian or get bangs or something. Very relatable. We need a little change.
No, he was talking about me for both of those things.
All right.
But there is, I should say, it seems like we've been a little negative so far. So I want to bring us up and say we do have hope, because we haven't talked about the Greens yet.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
The Greens are going to fix things.
I always believed in those guys.
We've mostly talked about, I think, the election and the election night. Can you give us like a recent history of the Greens, who they are, and how this coalition came to be?
Yes. So the Green Party, a recent history of the Greens. The Greens have been around since the 1980s, and they were originally a sort of a coalition between some radical leftists and left liberals and even some conservatives.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, okay, this isn't necessarily that recent if we're going back all the way to the 80s, but the Greens, I think, they're oftentimes talked about as sort of the torchbearers of like 1968. So like, the student protests in the late 60s. And in a way, I do think the party kind of comes out of a moment where not necessarily left-wing politics is hegemonic, but certain left-wing ideas like anti-racism and feminism, and especially in the German-speaking world, just an acknowledgement that fascism was bad and an explicit anti-fascism. Being something,
it's very hard to get parties to agree on that.
Right. I mean, in theory, everybody agrees on it, but in practice, like, people weren't necessarily talking about it that much. And maybe for the American listeners or for the non-German or non-Austrian listeners, it's very common in the German-speaking world for people to identify themselves as 68ers. So people are like, oh yeah, I'm a 68er, and that just is what people who were active during the 68 movement or even just alive during the 68 movement oftentimes define themselves as. And in a way that people don't really do in the United States. Maybe your dad will joke about like, oh, I used to be a hippie, but it's not really such a cultural identity like it is here. And I think this has to do with people wanting to distance themselves from like the Nazi sins of their parents. But yeah, so the Greens are sort of a left liberal, radical left, and even they have some conservative elements at their beginning in the 1980s. But into the 90s and the 2000s, you do see a more conservative shift in the party. In the early 2000s, the leader of the Greens was a guy named Alexander van der Bellen, who's currently he's famous now because he's the president of Austria.
Exactly.
And van der Bellen, interestingly, so oftentimes people think of the Greens as being to the left of the Social Democrats, but this certainly isn't necessarily true now. And it hasn't necessarily even been true for decades. So Van der Bellen used to be a social democrat, and he joined the Greens in the late 80s, so shortly after they were formed. And in his autobiography, he has this really interesting quotation where he says, when I left the Social Democrats and joined the Greens, I went from being, quote, an arrogant anti-capitalist to a generous left liberal. So he identifies the Social Democrats in that tradition with, quote, arrogant anti-capitalism, and the Green tradition with nice left liberalism. And I think that's actually quite accurate.
It's interesting, yeah.
And the Green Party in the 2000s and the 2010s, to get into more recent history, as your question specified, I think the social base of the party is mostly middle to upper middle class. A lot of educated professionals. Again, this is also a lot of the base of sort of the activists of the SPÖ, but the SPÖ also has a historical connection to the labor movement and a current connection to unions and the union institutions and labor institutions that the Green Party really doesn't have. So, the Green Party, it's people who studied at university, upper middle class people who think of sort of, who vote in starkly moral terms. They think of their vote almost as a form of charity. The politics that the party has supported, the politics that the party was supporting during the 2010s was definitely, at least their cultural politics were left-wing, very openly pro-immigration, obviously pro-environment, and pro-feminism. They are for things like having quotas in government and in various industries, and on the company level for things like how many women versus men a company should be allowed to have.
Actually, that's very similar to the German Green Party. Because
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Because so when they started from like you had a lot of the 68ers in this party, but you also had
Heinrich Böll was like literally one of like the main figureheads of this party in like the mid 80s.
You also had conservatives, and you had people like leaving the CDU to go to the Green Party actually, like in the beginning. And the slogan was in the beginning, it was not left, not right, but at the front.
Okay, Andrew Yang.
It's the bit from The Simpsons of like twirling towards freedom.
And so you had, and this is like a typical thing for the Green Party, is the inner coalition fights, because you had like, you wanted to be a party or like a movement before you were a party to like combine to bring everyone together over these topics of like anti-nuclear, like anti-atomkraft.
Anti-nuclear power.
Thank you. My brain.
Chernobyl has a huge impact on all this.
Definitely. They gained like a momentum there. And again with Fukuyama they did as well. But anyway,
Fukushima.
Not Fukuyama.
Fukushima. I mean, Prince Fukuyama's done enough damage.
The end of history also sounds like something the Greens
It's the end of history. And also, the Greens are cool.
I mean, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
It's been a long day. So anyway, Fukushima.
Yes.
I like the idea much better of that nuclear power plant being called Fukuyama.
Well, he is a nuclear power plant to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, you see that a lot. And then when they try to like go into coalitions, like when they start to actually become like a not only oppositional party, because they started like to push out the far right of their party, where that CDU guy left the Green Party again and said like, okay, they're not on my side anymore. And then they start to push out like the radical left wing of a faction of this party, which would be like Jutta Dittfurt, for example. She's still very active and gets in a lot of fights still on Twitter with people. So they became this like what you just said, like this like green liberal kind of like left liberal thing when they start to actually try to not be an only opposition anymore,
Yeah.
So
that is sorry, just to quickly add to Julia's point, is like that is definitely the only like really consistent takeaway you can get from like all European Greens, is that in opposition they maintain these radical elements. Even some of the like conservative protect the homeland kind of like manicured garden environmentalism is still there, but like it's basically across the board. As soon as they get into power, even at like a state level, like local government, they seem protected, or like they don't fall into the like neoliberal trap at local levels, but definitely at like state levels. The most pronounced example of that is the Irish Greens, where right up until they got into coalition government, they were like getting all the US soldiers out of the Shannon airport. They were like trying to divert these motorways. They were going to disturb archaeological sites. They were a big part of the Shell to Sea campaign, which was literally Ireland trying to get like the company Shell out of like Irish waters. And right before they went into coalition, they like put in this like government, they backed this government investigation into the Corrib gas field, which was like corrupt as all hell. And then as soon as they got into government, they withdrew the complaint. It just like happened immediately overnight.
Sounds like a Green Party.
Yeah.
So all I want to add is that I'd like to come back to this, but I don't know if this is an element of every Green Party, but it's a dynamic certainly in every Green Party, and it's a shift in the definition of politics from like a materialist politics to something else. What that something else is kind of vague. It could be, I think, quite well-meaning in the sense of
yes, we agree.
being based around social movements, being based around movements like feminism and things like that. But in a more vague sense, sometimes it's just about being like a new generational movement. And this is certainly from the 60s. Like, doesn't matter what the kids are up to, but it's good. Yeah. Whatever those kids are doing.
Kids are
you see
right.
this, I think it was a newspaper, it might have been Die Welt, that had Sebastian Kurz and Greta Thunberg on the cover. And like,
nice.
This is what the future is.
Yeah.
Because whatever is happening, this is, the kids, we support them.
There was also the kid who, from the Catholic school in the U.S., who had the Native American guy drum the thing in front of him, and he got like
the MAGA kid.
The MAGA kid, he was also on the cover.
Wow, Jesus.
No, not really. Of course. Well, you actually believe me.
But, no, I'm sorry. The world's so fucked. I believe that.
But
that is like, it's very fucking Donald Tusk, who's now like the head of the European People's Party. He's like the head of like
Donald
center,
Tusk?
center right in all of like Europe, essentially. Like after this coalition was made, he was just like, this is the future. Everyone absorb and cannibalize the green movement. That's how we're going to survive.
But I think in a slightly pessimistic, a more pessimistic sense, is that what was the 60s? I think there was a lot going on in the 60s, but a lot of it was just, we're like a new youth movement. You should listen to us. And there were a lot of things that came out of it. There was a lot of, in the 70s, there were fucking, Maoist sex going wild all over Europe.
Maoist sex.
And then, and then exactly. And then so you have in the Greens, a lot of them. Yeah, exactly. So in Germany, in the 80s, what does it consolidate into? Like, well, it's, we're going to do this green thing. That represents, it's tautological in the sense that whatever these new people are up to, we'll call that green politics.
Interestingly enough, the left faction of the Green Party was actually coming from the Maoist tradition of like the 68ers, which is very...
It's the same in Austria.
I would like to center... In 2017, the Greens fell out of Parliament.
Yeah, that's the next thing I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
And in 2019, now they're part of the coalition. So what happened?
Okay.
What is this? Hit success story.
Well, okay. Yeah, I think we should rewind to the 2017 election for a little while. So when the 2017 was also a snap election after the Grand Coalition fell apart between, over a disagreement between the SPÖ and the ÖVP, and people weren't expecting the election to come so soon, and a lot of people who are just generally against the FPÖ decided that they needed to vote for the SPÖ because for a while it did look like the SPÖ was maybe going to come in first. They were pulling within a few percentage points of the ÖVP for at least a little while. In the high 20s, and the ÖVP was in the low 30s. And the SPÖ's main pitch, other than look at Christian Kern, he's such a cool guy, yes we can, was, look, just vote for us, and if we come in first place, we'll get to be the chancellor part, we'll get to, be the governing party again, and we'll get to keep the FPÖ out. So a lot of people... as I sort of alluded to before, a lot of the Green Coalition was, left liberals, generally people who don't like the far right for obvious reasons, people who, in the best case scenario, people who take anti-racism quite seriously. And obviously, a lot of these people are motivated by sort of the SPÖ's call, you have to vote tactically, you have to vote strategically, we got to keep the far right as far from power as possible. So because of this in 2017, you actually see a massive movement from the Greens, from their electoral coalition, which was around 10% of the electorate in 2013, to the SPÖ and the Greens, and they ran a pretty poor electoral campaign for a lot of different reasons, and people were sort of expecting they would do poorly, but nobody expected that they wouldn't end up in parliament, I don't think. They just barely managed to miss the 4% cutoff. They got 3.8% of the vote, and they didn't get into parliament. There were, a few. There's just so much to. Maybe I'm talking too much about things that aren't directly relevant. I'm not sure. Two things that really sunk the Greens in 2017 were two factions of their party actually split off from the party in the months before the election. the first.
Oh wow.
The first was and the first in my opinion the more interesting faction to split off was their youth organization. Their youth organization actually got in trouble for criticizing the party, and this is a little bit ironic, for criticizing the party not just for being kind of neoliberal, not taking strong enough stances against things like cutting Mindestsicherung, which is like what is that in Germany? There's probably a different word in Germany. It's like welfare, cutting welfare.
Yeah. It's like the least amount you need to live. So
the terms are different in Germany and Austria anyway. So the youth organization not only criticized the mother party, the Mutterpartei, for things like taking a weak stance on defending welfare, but also for being generally anti-democratic and unable to cope with criticism, which is, I say that's ironic because, as I just mentioned, the party does come out of, the 1960s youth movement and sort of represents a sort of a hegemony, sort of a deepening of liberal democratic hegemony to some degree, I think. Obviously, it's a little bit limited. Okay, so the youth organization criticizes the party and actually gets kicked out of the party. Before they were Die Junge Grüne, and they ended up joining forces with Die Junge Linke, which was the youth organization of the Communist Party, and they actually did. They campaigned for the communists under an election list called so the Communist Party now is just called KPÖ. Yeah, it is the spirit. KPÖ, and they called it KPÖ Plus, and Plus is actually an acronym for platform. PL is platform, and then the U is unabhängig, which means independent, and the S is solidarisch, so solid. So the platform of independence and the independent solidarity platform, I guess.
I find that quite interesting because, like, the German, like the Junge Grüne in Germany are also very well known to be way more anti-capitalist than the Green Party, and way more critical. So I have a lot of like friends that are organized in the Junge Grüne, and they don't want to like go up to the real Grüne because like. Yeah, they suck.
That's Green parties all over Europe. Yeah,
it's interesting that in Austria they actually like kick them out. Like they split up. Or
not not all of them did, and those that didn't are now parliamentarians and currently writing lengthy apologias on social media for. We can get into that later. Maybe that's a little bit too gossipy, actually. But
no, I like that. Give me the gossip.
Get messy on the pod.
So I just want to say full disclosure. I was not a member of the Young Greens, but I did join the Young. So
I was not.
So his compost pile was.
But
not
I did work on I volunteered for the KPÖ Plus campaign. So I came into contact with a lot of the Young Greens through that, and then I subsequently joined the Communist Party, of which I'm a member. And I also joined the Junge Linke last year after they merged, after the Young Greens and the Junge Linke merged, and now they're just all the Junge Linke. So yeah, a lot of
they all just come.
Yeah,
I have a quick question though. Why didn't you join? Jetzt the Pilz list?
And that's the
it seems pretty cool. Seems pretty cool to me.
Thanks for getting me back on track. So and the other split from the Greens was and maybe this is less interesting, but still kind of interesting from the gossipy, interpersonal perspective.
Then it's more.
I think it's way more interesting.
Come on, you know who we are.
Right. One of the Greens' most popular parliamentarians is this guy named Peter Pilz. And Peter Pilz was like
not a real person.
His name literally means Peter fungus, Peter mushroom.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So who does this Brothers Grimm character? What does he do?
Peter Pilz.
Who's this brother? Yeah. So Pilz was one of the highest profile parliamentarians. He was popular as an anti-corruption crusader. He made a name as an anti-corruption crusader over the years. through various sort of parliamentary, initiatives, inquiries that he himself sort of organized that transcended party boundaries. So he also, was a pretty popular figure. Also, even among some conservative Austrians, he kind of got, well, it depends on whose story you believe, but some of the Pilz fans or supporters say that he got snubbed at the Green Party conference. This requires explaining a little bit about how electoral lists work in Austria and Germany. But basically, as most people probably know, rather than just voting for a candidate, you're actually voting for a party, and the party has a list of candidates, usually with the leader of the party being the number one on the list, and they would, in theory, get to be chancellor if that party comes in first. And then there's a number 2 and a number 3 and so on. And usually there are like 200 or 300 spots, on a candidate list. They don't have to be that many. If you get a really low spot on a list, then you're probably a less important person in the party. And you probably, and if the party doesn't do that well, and doesn't get that many parliamentary seats, there's a chance you won't get to be in parliament. And Peter Pilz, at the parliamentary conference where the Greens sort of decided on the list ranking of their candidates, Pilz, got a fairly low ranking because a lot of the younger party activists don't really like him for a variety of reasons. And he was...
But his name...
Yeah, because of his name. Yeah, I think it went a little bit deeper than that. There were... people saw him as, maybe not being the strongest person on sort of, things like, anti-racism or feminism. So... maybe
because he is.
Yeah, exactly. And
can you elaborate on
definitely
that?
not a feminist, as we'll talk about in a second. Yeah. Pilz was so pissed about the list spot that he got that he left the Green Party, and then he founded his own electoral list called the Liste Pilz, which was an electoral coalition. He some Green Party,
it's called Hezbollah.
Yeah, right. Some Green Party members split off and joined him, and he also kind of, I guess, drafted, various figures kind of, in left liberals in Austrian public life, who had various representing various areas of expertise to join his list, to join his electoral coalition. And he ended up he just got over 4%. And so he successfully split the Green Coalition to mean, in a way that they didn't make him to parliament, but he got into parliament with just over 4%. And he was in parliament until this year when the Liste Pilz, I think, got between 1% and 2% and weren't on anybody's radar.
Yeah.
The Pilz list.
Yeah, I guess I should also mention, unfortunately, the KPÖ, as a member, unfortunately, the KPÖ didn't even crack 1% in 2017 or in 2019. So, obviously, that's not looking too good. Anyway, the Greens. Okay, and then to fast forward to 2019 and the Green Party's performance. The Green Party got just over, or they got, I think, 13.9% in total. So, basically 14%, which was by far the best result that they've had in their history. And it looks good at first sight, and it also looks good that the FPÖ, I think the FPÖ got 16%. So the Greens are right on the FPÖ's heels. And compared to 2017, that's obviously a massive improvement for anybody who is against racism, is against creeping fascism. But when you actually look at it more closely, the result doesn't look so good. The SPÖ could no longer tell voters, hey, look, vote for us. We have a chance of coming in first, because the polls made it very clear to anybody who was even paying a little bit of attention that Kurz was going to be the next chancellor. So the strategic voting argument for the SPÖ didn't work. And because of that, a lot of Green voters who voted for the SPÖ in 2017 returned to the Greens in 2019. The Greens were probably boosted somewhat by the climate movement, by Fridays for Future, and by a lot of young voters who turn out for them, which is obviously a very positive thing. But yeah, I just want to say that caveat about, the SPU, and this was coupled also with the SPU getting their worst, the Social Democrats getting their worst result in history with just under 22% of the vote. And we could go on to talk about what the Greens are actually going to do now that they're in Parliament and their platform.
I just wanted to ask quickly before we get into the platform. In my notes here, I see that 93% of the Parliament members of the Greens voted to join the coalition.
Yes.
Only 33% of the Green membership wanted to join the coalition. So what is going on there?
Interesting. I hadn't even...
That 33% number I got was from like immediately the day of the election, basically, or when the results came in.
That makes more sense to be honest.
Yeah.
So what? So they warmed up to it over a little time?
Well, I think everybody thought that... Well, I think most people thought that there was probably going to be a coalition of the FPÖ and the ÖVP. So I think... if you're a Green voter and you're thinking there's no realistic chance that your party's going to have a shot at coalition anyway, and you don't want to kind of demean yourself by saying, yeah, I would join with those, authoritarian conservatives, maybe you would say, yeah, no, I don't think my party should go into a coalition with them. But when push comes to shove, or when push came to shove, I'd be surprised if less than half of the people who voted for the Greens were opposed to the Greens currently being in government. Although I could be wrong about that again. I mean, I haven't seen recent survey data about how Green voters feel about their party having joined the coalition. I think most would say that they were fine with it. Maybe not fine with it, but that it's less bad than having a center-right far-right coalition.
The turquoise blue.
Yeah,
exactly.
But okay,
so then how do people feel when the platform came out?
I just want to get back to you mentioned the 93% figure
sure.
of the parliamentarians voting for the Greens. I think I was actually a little bit surprised by this. There was a lot of talk that there would be more dissent amongst people in the party, just because the platform that the Greens and the ÖVP negotiated was so friendly to the ÖVP. The Greens basically got very little through what they demanded. That they got very few of their demands were actually realized in their platform. So and people were saying, all of the members of the youth organization who are going to be in Parliament are going to vote against it, and that was true in some instances, but clearly most of the the professional politicians and the Greens support what's happening.
Yeah. So just to review, we can start with the cabinet level, I guess. So the Greens got 2 cabinet positions. More? I have 2 written down here.
They got vice chancellor.
Oh yeah, and vice chancellor.
Vice chancellor, and then 2 cabinet positions. Yeah. What were the 2 cabinet positions again? One's like
justice and climate change.
Oh yeah, the climate change
Whatever
one
those
is a
might be
new
called.
cabinet position that's basically made special for them. I believe.
You're Green. You get
So
Yeah.
the vice chancellor is going to be the leader of the Green Party, who's a guy named Werner Kogler, and the Minister of Justice is a woman named Alma Zadic, who actually, interestingly enough, was in Parliament the past 2 years as a member of Liste Pilz. So the interesting thing about Liste Pilz is that most of the people on the list, or most of the people in the party, or whatever you want to call it, electoral coalition, were people who were heretofore new to politics, except for Pilz himself. It was people who sort of were leaders of leading bureaucrats or leaders in industry, or mostly like NGO type people, lawyers and Zadic.
So technocrats, kind of.
Yeah, very technocratic approach. Zadic was a member of the Liste Pilz. So the Greens have those 2 things, but other than that, they didn't get much, especially, the vice chancellor. I mean, it's a bit like the vice president in the United States. They don't really have, they're... Yeah, HC Strache was the last vice chancellor, and his main responsibility, I think his title was actually vice chancellor responsible for sport.
Racism.
Responsible for racism. Responsible for sport. Like he was like the minister of
your main responsibility.
He would like meet with like the Olympic athletes and stuff and like shake their hands and stuff, because I guess they couldn't think of anything better for him to do. I mean,
to cope with them.
Strache's. I don't want to get too off track here. Strache's main I think he's a very skilled politician, but probably not a very skilled he's probably not a very skilled ruler. He's just skilled at like riling up the crowd and getting people to vote a certain way. So the I would say like having Zadic as the justice minister is kind of the only real I don't know. I think that's almost more important than having the vice chancellorship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair.
So a lot of people pointed out that, so I'd like to say two things in particular about the platform. One about like the climate policy. So the Greens finally got in. What did they add? And then there's like a criticism, I guess, that I know you pointed out that, and a lot of people voted tactically in the sense, or I mean, the coalition was formed tactically in the sense that it's better than the union with the far right. But a lot of people point out that when it comes to all of the racist stuff, to put it simply, that Austria was doing, a lot of it can just continue. So how do we weigh those two things?
Okay.
To what extent did the Green add, and how much did the Greens really block something worse from happening?
Yeah, so the environmental aspects of the platform were, obviously come from the Greens, but even they aren't particularly robust, especially in light of, the behemoth that climate change is. Officially, the government acknowledges that they're going to aim to have Austria be carbon neutral by 2040, but they don't really specify many concrete measures to take Austria in that direction. There is, one of the planks of the platform is a carbon tax, but again, they don't go into specifics about how the carbon tax is going to look, and there's no element that would make the carbon tax like a redistributive carbon tax that would make it like not go down like what happened in France with the Gilets jaunes. So I don't really think even if your main issue is even if you care about stopping climate change, like I think from a tactical perspective, you can't in good conscience support that, because it's gonna be a political non-starter. Okay. And then what else do they want to do? They want to incentivize people buying electric cars. Rather than, for example, yeah.
Damn, are you sure that the Austrian Greens and the German Greens just like aren't the exact same?
I mean, the ideas are, of course, the same, because they're all fucking like, they want green capitalism in the sense of like rich people can buy electric cars.
Yeah.
Well, like I understand it being a thing in Germany in like what we've previously referred to it as big car land. Because you can't really attack the auto industry here without being like,
we got it everywhere.
Crushed.
Well, as far as I understand, Austria, I mean, the car, the steel, I don't know about coal, but those industries, like in Germany, are pretty powerful. And there's really nothing.
What cars does Austria
What Austrian cars then?
Probably just German cars, but they're made there or something.
You put an Ö somewhere in there.
all right. We're throwing shade.
One thing that does look encouraging, well, I would say like, it's kind of the most positive.
The firearms industry of Austria.
The most positive aspect of the platform that the Greens were able to get through, but I don't want to be too optimistic about it, is, as you mentioned earlier, they did successfully get the creation of a Ministry of the Environment and Infrastructure. But the problem is that
Strabag. Fuck them, by the way.
The problem is that the ÖVP is still going to control the treasury. They're still going to control the funds of the state. So de facto, they could seriously limit anything that the Ministry of the Environment could do. So it seems more symbolic than anything else. And when the Greens weren't in Parliament over the past couple of years, one of the biggest things the party lobbied against was new mega infrastructure projects, like at the Vienna International Airport. There are currently plans to build another runway to make the airport, more of an international hub. And there are also plans to build, a massive freeway which runs under a national park in Vienna called the Lobau National Park. And the Greens had sort of activist organizations with very close ties to the party, and effectively they've now acknowledged that there's nothing that they can or want to do against these new infrastructure projects now that they're in government. They've kind of just dropped the issue, which I think is a big, it's a betrayal of a lot of their activists, and you hate to see it. Yeah, but it's not something that should come as surprising to anybody who was paying attention.
So what about it seems like, at least something I saw in the news, was that an example that Kurz was already talking about, the Headscarf Ban and this idea that the Frauenpolitik is included under the integration ministry, and the Greens kind of not even pushing back against these kind of moves. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So one of the things that the government agreed upon is that they're going to institute a headscarf ban for girls, I believe, under the age of 14. And there's even some talk about so a headscarf ban in schools, that is. And there's even been talk about having a headscarf ban for teachers, although I think that's more just, I don't think there's anything currently on the table about that. And the Greens haven't given this any pushback at all. And even some people in the Green, even some people sort of in the Green, some people affiliated with the Greens, some Green politicians have said that, this is really about they've tried to put a left-wing spin on it, saying this is about feminism, this is about, protecting children, which I think for anybody who thinks about this for, in a not completely selbstverarschende way for more than a minute, anybody who's not completely self-deluded realizes that this is nonsense. Like the state shouldn't be telling, girls or women, how to dress or what to do with their bodies, period. I don't think that's an issue that any, leftists need to spend time wringing their hands over or debating, regardless of how leftists feel about religion and how much we should critique it. You just mentioned that the Frauenminister, so the Minister of Women's Affairs, is sort of
it's a guy.
Yeah.
It's a guy.
He wears the FBI female body inspector shirt.
It's been subordinated to the Ministry for Integration, which.
So women need to be integrated.
Yeah, right. It's more.
All right.
I'm just imagining this.
It gets more racist.
It gets more racist.
Tell me.
There was just a joint interview. Two of my colleagues at MOSAIC just wrote about this issue. There was just a joint interview on ZIP 2, which is kind of the sort of the nightly news broadcast in Austria, between Sebastian Kurz and Werner Kogler, so the leaders of the Greens and the ÖVP respectively, about where they asked specifically this question to Sebastian Kurz, why is the Ministry of Women's Affairs being subordinated to the Ministry of Integration? And the answer Sebastian Kurz gave was he actually said, we really need to fight against this macho culture that's being, brought here by immigrants and all these foreigners who are doing things like all these foreigners who are doing things.
Damn.
I'm going to quickly translate the direct quotation because I think it's very
yes, do it.
So
I want to hear it.
I really like the idea of them having to be integrated. Like women, you can finally get back from the bus.
Was Frauenrechte betrifft, sind viele Themen noch ungelöst. So concerning women's rights, many issues haven't been solved. Es kommen aber neue Herausforderungen dazu. So there are constantly new challenges coming. Wie das Sicherheitsgefühl von Frauen in großen Städten. So many women in big cities, in major cities, don't feel that they have a sense of security. Das Aufkommen von Macho-Kulturen, die teilweise nach Österreich importiert worden sind an manchen Schulen. So the importation of macho culture that's partially, the emergence of macho culture that's partially being imported to Austria. In existence in a lot of schools, teilweise falsches Rollenverständnis von Zuwanderern, die es nicht so ernst nehmen mit der Gleichstellung von Mann und Frau. So, a direct quotation, migrants or immigrants don't take, gender equality as very seriously. Sie nehmen es nicht so ernst. Those migrants, they just don't take gender equality very seriously.
Austrians and Burschenschaftler.
Not like Burschenschaftler.
Because
not like Geilomobil.
Are very known to be
geil.
Very known to be very feminist.
I as the chancellor of Austria feel like, the country that produced Arnold Schwarzenegger, we need to step back from macho culture, which is clearly coming from outside.
I'm just imagining.
Anyway, here's the video of me with all the booby ladies.
Wait. Is Arnold Schwarzenegger actually like a Vorbote of what happened now? Like being a conservative, a Republican in the US, but also being very into climate.
Oh shit!
I like the idea that he's some sort of.
That's very good.
Yeah.
It's the Schwarzenegger Koalition.
Exactly. We should establish that.
That should be the title of the episode. Schwarzenegger Koalition.
Yeah.
You mentioned you have to be self-deluded to believe this, but who? There's a similar argument I think in Austria too, where they're but in I think in France this argument's made that it's we're having a problem with anti-Semitism because they're importing it, from
France was never anti-Semitic.
We have that in Germany.
Never had an anti-Semitism problem here before.
Nope, never heard of that.
Germans are arguing like that, and that is a weird shit.
It's it's crazy. Have you guys seen the news with how Harvey Weinstein is pretending to have a limp and be an old man and stuff? He should have just said blamed it on hip hop culture or something. I'm sorry, it's all these foreigners who taught. That's the only reason I was a serial rapist for 30 years.
It basically boils down.
It's not part of our culture.
It basically boils down to every second week you get the editorial being damn, why did these Syrian refugees shit in my pants? How did this happen?
Hip hop culture.
Interestingly, on this point, and one thing I wanted to say, so this is just to fully answer Rob's question. When Sebastian Kurz said this stuff that's quite frankly absurd, Werner Kogler didn't contradict him at all. Didn't say anything. So just this silence, I think, speaks volumes. And that was the point of of my colleagues Masa and Rainer in their MOSAIC article. If any of the German listeners want to go and read that, I would highly recommend it. And another point on this,
Google Translate does a fine job. It's a good publication.
Good. Yeah. So the issue of liberal Islamophobia is really big in Austria, and one of my colleagues at MOSAIC, Beniamino Pratko, actually did a deep dive into this issue in an academic article he published over the summer. And the title of the article is Devils from Our Past, Liberal Islamophobia in Austria as Historicist Racism. And in the article, he interviews various journalists who broadly identify as liberal and then analyzes quotations from them to show how they sort of embody or display, how hegemonic liberal Islamophobia has become, even amongst people nominally on the left. And there was this one quotation that really stood out to me from a journalist asked how he sees his role as dealing with sexism coming from Muslims. And the journalist responded as such: well, one of our jobs is to inform people, isn't it? And I don't mean in the sense of infotainment, a little news and a lot of ha-ha. No, you can actually, if you write it often enough, perhaps someone will think twice, perhaps a woman will think twice before she decides to marry, say, an Iranian, not because he's necessarily a bad man, but because his mindset is just completely different. And then it might well happen that she ends up locked up in a home, or that she will be beaten because she wants to see her friends. I don't say everyone is like that, but it's much more common than here. And people should know that. I mean, you can play a game of water polo against crocodiles if you feel like it. But you should know before that they are crocodiles.
What a bunch of batshit insane people in Austria.
Yeah.
I love that someone who locks someone up and beats them isn't necessarily a bad man.
To tie things together a little bit here, when I was talking about the Greens coalition, I tried to emphasize that it's mostly left liberals, and then we talked about Werner Kogler and Sebastian Kurz being interviewed on Austrian public television, and Kurz saying this thing about sexism being imported by immigrants, and Werner Kogler just kind of sitting there and not saying anything. Well, I don't think this should really surprise anybody in light of how hegemonic sort of anti-Muslim racism has become in Austria. And obviously this goes together with hostility towards immigrants of all kinds. But I think this is just a really good sort of encapsulation of how common these attitudes are, even amongst people who are liberals, and the Greens coalition. I don't think that contradicts necessarily something that your typical Green voter would believe. Obviously, there are more anti-racist minded people in the Greens as well, but I just thought that needed to be pointed out.
Yeah,
I'm just blown away that they used Iranian as the denomination of person who's the one they have to watch out for, because I follow Salman, Mr. Danny, and his brother, the Iranian bodybuilders, and they love their wives and they love their mother.
Wait. Salman is not together with his wife anymore.
He still loved his wife.
Yeah, but who's that new girl?
His new girl, he loves her.
But he doesn't show her face
because he respects her.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't want thirsty,
but his
the
wife
other
was okay
Iranian bodybuilders coming out after him.
But his wife was okay because she was already an influencer, or why?
Because I don't know, maybe who knows? But still, I do like Salman and maybe not Mr. Danny. Mr. Danny's kind of a rapper sort of guy. He wants to be a rapper. Yeah. But Salman and his brothers, they love their girlfriends and wives, and they love their mom, and I think that they
do love their mom.
Yeah, I think that they would be a fantastic forbild for Austria of how to treat women.
Really?
Yeah.
Just an idea here. Like, maybe to address this problem, they can reach some agreement where the Greens they're not allowed to interrupt or correct quotes, so that won't change. But then they can get a website like Die Wahrheit.ht, and they can give quotes or statements like a certain number of Pinocchios.
It sounds super right wing, like Die Wahrheit.at.
But also part of the agreement will be they can't use Pinocchio. They have to use some really probably racist Austrian fable.
Crocodiles for Iranians.
But just an idea. That's called problem solving.
Weren't the Greens too the ones that then had that magazine that the
Ava, yes. Let's talk about Ava. No. Oh my god.
Do we have enough time for that?
I don't think we have time.
God damn it.
That's a little
quick.
Taste.
Give us a taste of it.
Really quick, Adam, is there anything else you want to say about the platform with the Black Green Coalition? I guess we should be saying turquoise green.
Oh yeah. People are calling it.
That's a disgusting color combination. I'd rather have black and green.
Can we talk about this? What was it? Inauguration ceremony, or what was it?
Oh, the swearing in ceremony where the subtitles were fucked.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's hear what the last bit of the platform, and then we can just go on to the nonsense we've.
Okay, yeah. There are actually a few more things to say about the platform. One of which is the subtitle of the platform, or I guess the motto of the platform. Have you guys heard this?
Nice.
It's
no, but that's what the Greens get to write.
Well, if the Greens wrote it, it doesn't reflect very well on them. So the motto is Klima und Grenzen schützen. Protecting. So in English, that's protecting our borders and the climate.
Oh my god, bring both of them together.
With your Chinese tank that you get at Chinese Starbucks.
Yes.
Oh
I didn't know that was actually part of the platform or like in the motto.
That is insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is basically what it is.
Yeah, that's literally what those two parties are.
Yeah, both parties.
And you know
together.
what? Another funny thing, very
Equal.
funny. I mean, it's actually kind of sad, but also funny. So the color of the Green Party is obviously green. The color of the far right FPÖ is blue. And if you combine green and blue, you get turquoise, which is the color of the ÖVP.
Yeah.
Another important thing about the platform, I mean, to me, this is one of the most important things, is that in the platform is the statement that the parties are going to aim for a budget. They're going to aim for the Schwarze Null, which is a big thing also in German. It's a big thing in German political discourse.
Wait,
Yes.
Schwarze Null? No.
That means that they're not going to pass any
That's the
budget. They're not going to
worst.
pass any budget deficits. And
You won't have any like social spending, like
so if
like,
I
if you
love
say that you're
stopping
not going
climate
to run a
change
budget
on a
deficit,
balanced
if you say that
budget.
you're going to, if you commit yourself to the Schwarze Null, if you say that you're not going to have a budget deficit, well, there are two ways you're going to do this. The first is by, raising taxes on the extremely wealthy, which the ÖVP.
Don't you fucking dare do that.
Which the ÖVP
not
is
gonna
not
do
going
that.
to do. The ÖVP is,
you're gonna do like a
yeah.
internal like what's it called? Devaluation. So
You can't
you're
devalue
not-
the euro.
No, but you're not gonna pay like you're not gonna pay like raise the wages of workers.
Oh,
by,
no,
like,
of course not. Why would you ever do
Yeah.
that?
That's what Germany did, and they did. it
Austria
with
tried to
the
pass the
and they did-
60-hour work week, I think, too, if I'm not
We
mistaken.
did, yeah.
At least that was like...
that happened in the last.
Oh, they
coalition,
did?
Yeah.
Put some
Nice.
So
Nice.
and that's another thing. So the Schwarze Null, to me, that's like one of the biggest things. The environmental platform, or the environmental part of the coalition platform, isn't even very good on its own terms. But even the limited stuff that is there, it just kind of boggles the imagination as to how it could ever come to pass if the government is committing itself to Schwarze Null, if it's committing itself to not running a budget deficit. So really, I think it's a joke. And
I mean, I know that like it normally goes that like Austria gives Germany the bad ideas, typically, but they literally took. I mean,
the Schwarze Null
the
was
Schwarze
a whole
Null
German
is not
idea.
only like the Schwarze Null has so many implications of being bad, not only just for Germany, but just that it's like devalued like the. I don't know, like a lot of the implications of what the Schwarze Null in Germany has done is like also worse than just Europe in general, because it's like its main economic producer aside from France.
yeah,
I mean, you kind of put it on an EU level when you say like,
Yeah.
okay, we want.
Well, it is austerity.
Yeah, exactly. When you say like, okay, like you can only have a certain percentage of countries being in debt to the EU, the others, and only to a certain amount.
Yeah, there's a reason why Wolfgang
Even
Schäuble
though
was
that's
in those
very unnecessary,
negotiations.
you could just like have
with
them all be
the-
indebted. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, but Germany said like, okay, we're gonna join the Eurozone, but only if we do this.
It is the stupidest idea to come out of Germany in quite some time, and that's the thing that Austria then takes in. I'm mad. I had faith in this turquoise green coalition, but now
yeah, and yeah. I mean, there's really just so much gross stuff in the platform. I mean, we already talked about racism. Sort of racism against Muslims. We've talked about, Schwarze Null. In addition to the Schwarze Null, there are going to be massive tax cuts for corporations, as there were, under the last coalition government.
Good.
Under the last coalition government, and I think this actually may have also hurt the FPÖ. The government changed the government got rid of the 40-hour work week, which is probably the single biggest achievement of the workers' movement ever. So now it's legal. Your boss can have you work up to 60 hours without paying you the same overtime that he would have had to pay you before, or that she would have had to pay you before. And the Greens,
how are you supposed to
the Greens, I mean, the Greens could have challenged this. Like they could have thrown down the gauntlet with the ÖVP and said, hey, like, we have to, reverse this. Otherwise, you can go into a coalition with the FPÖ. And the Greens really didn't. There are so many areas there are just so many issues in so many areas where the Greens could have really thrown down a gauntlet or really tried to drive a harder bargain. And from everything sort of coming out of the meetings that the press got a hold of, it really didn't look like, or I guess we can say this, the Greens did a really bad job of even attempting to give the impression that they were trying to drive a hard bargain or really trying to throw down the gauntlet. And I don't think we can I think we need to analyze this ideologically. And I think this gets back to the fact that the Greens, I think this gets back to, who the Greens voter coalition are. It's mostly, middle class or upper middle class left liberals who, just wanted the FPÖ to be out of power, and have a concept of politics that isn't really that's more oriented around agreement than around conflict, and not necessarily that into things like, or not that turned off by things like gifts to wealthy to wealthy mega capitalists or to industry, and they don't like the FPÖ in power because to them. Yeah, to them, when they think of the FPÖ, their image of the FPÖ is the image of Strache and Ibiza. It's this image of this guy, doing cocaine and drinking Red Bull, who's a slob, who's vulgar, and they don't want that. They think that's embarrassing. Kind of like how liberals in the United States think Trump is just a vulgar embarrassment. But other than that, there's not necessarily a lot more to their politics. Like the Greens had this one billboard, which really made an impression on me during the election, and it was a billboard of Johann Gudenus and Strache. There was a screenshot taken from the video, and on the billboard it said something like "Zurück zum Abstand." Zurück zum Anstand rather. It said like we want to bring back Anstand. So Anstand is actually kind of a difficult word to translate into English, but it means something along the lines of decency. The reason that this word is hard to translate is because it's an abstract concept that's basically an empty signifier. But in the
German just doesn't have enough of those.
But in the context of having this poster of Strache and Gudenus, the guys who are supposed to represent the opposite of Anstand, and then saying we're the party of Anstand, we're the party of decency, they're saying that. I mean, the impression that I got is that we're not like these gross corrupt thugs, but there was no positive.
These hip hop politicians.
Yeah, right. There's no positive. There's no positive content to it, right? It's just like, we're respectable. We're not like drunken, coked up assholes. Which I'm sorry, like, if that's your pitch, like, I mean, I'd rather have you than the drunken, coked up asshole. But I'm not going to be that surprised if if that's what you're running on, like. I don't think I can be that surprised if you don't actually stand up for anything.
Yeah, I think that captures what you said, Adam. That basically represents all of what this green movement is, or at least how it functions today. It is basically, you can't even call it a Band-Aid. It's just like, yeah, you should keep doing this.
It is a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid on cancer.
But it's not even on anything. It's not even a Band-Aid. The thing is so one thing I was thinking of was, we mentioned before that a lot of the Greens came out of the 68 movement. And this is valorized in Germany and Austria because they addressed their Nazi past and how fundamentally, they're this rot and this problem in European society. And yet you have these, if not the very same people, then the Green movement now saying, oh, but it's fucking Iranians who have the fundamentally rotted culture. In Europe, we learn how to be good.
Actually, that is a very 68 thing to do. You have people like Michel Houellebecq or something like that in France writing this novel. They're known to be a very provocative writer or something, being from the former New Left and stuff like that. So a lot of 68 old guys turned very misogynistic and very Islamophobic in their old days. So
I just remember the one tweet that I saw that like it was a woman in Germany who tweeted out the N-word, and then she said, "I can say that because I was in the '68 movement." And I think that encapsulates it perfectly.
But when we talk about black green being the future of Europe, what they mean is a very particular relationship between black and green. They mean black, which represents business, conservative
Sexy.
business as usual in Europe. And green is just, keep it a little fresh. Like green is supposed to be in the junior partner in that. It's never supposed to be the senior partner in that coalition.
Except if you're in Baden-Württemberg and you have, what's his name,
But
Kretschmann.
But if that happens,
he's a
then the
mess.
green doesn't mean anything. Green becomes black, black becomes green. It's
Green.
Same.
all
but
it
different.
represents is a little bit of maybe a little bit of zest in this business as usual in Europe.
Yeah.
And it's a disciplining factor that's saying this is Europe. It's not changing. It can never change. Green represents maybe a new. You get excited because it's generational politics.
Add a new
but
color.
this is
The green is the fact that your car is electric. The black is the fact that we blew up all of Cambodia to get it.
But I don't even know if it's that, because I don't know if Europe will seriously, like we say, it's a foregone fact that green capitalism will come about. I don't know. Clearly the Greens aren't
literally it cannot
exactly.
No.
So Green's going to be a little, I don't know, like something to wave around, and then 10 years they're like, we don't need that green shit anymore. It's just capitalism. Whatever this mass death in other parts of the world, it'll balance out.
See,
whatever.
I mean, that was kind of the thing that then what's her name brings up. Like this is almost a decade ago in like what was her big book, Naomi Klein's
This Changes
last
Everything?
one.
Yeah.
I mean, she even admits a decade ago that then like she was speaking with people who were like libertarian or whatever, that now they finally came across the green capitalism thing, and she's like, well, yeah, that's fine, but that cannot happen. Like 3 decades ago you could have done that and you just disregarded it.
You mean libertarians having fantasy views of how things work and not
No,
engaging with
exactly.
reality?
But, I mean, like, but the thing of the matter is that then like now there's the market for it, because I saw a poster in the U-Bahn today of like an event to teach you about how bad like fast fashion is and stuff like that. Like we are in that marketable area of like sexy green capitalism. However, it's not going to actually do anything if you know anything about
grün ist geil.
the amount of effort that it takes to combat climate change. We've already went past the the 2 or 3 Celsius
that mark.
Yeah, we're significantly past that. We're gonna like fry eventually. Like climate catastrophe is definitely gonna happen, and the thing that isn't gonna save it is this type of project. And you have to
more
have
Teslas for everyone.
Yeah, but I mean, like there doesn't, and I get the appeal then of this, because it lets you live the way that you would normally live, and you just get to like buy different stuff instead of then realizing the fact of like, a massive nationalized program, or in Europe's case, internationalized or transnational program to like plan the economy around, like what the only good thing that what's it called we had them on the show a while ago. DM25, where they had like a really solid, not only good thing, but the thing that they had the most solid like Green New Deal plan that then actually broke down like how they would finance it. Mm-hmm. I mean, given it was like the brainchild of Yanis Varoufakis, but still, like, that's a lot of fucking effort. And when you look at it, you explain to people like, you need $500 billion a year in loans from the ECB. That sounds like way too much, like it is a lot to stomach. So you can take this type of capitalism and just be like, well, if I, go vegan for, a couple of days a week, or I, don't shop at H&M, then I'm good. And that type of package is still just going to get everyone fucking murdered.
Just to follow up on this, I think people have a vision of green capitalism as they're going to co-opt the good greenness and turn it into this watered down thing where, you're just vegan once a week or whatever. But I think we should emphasize the transient nature of green capitalism, the idea of green capitalism. Green capitalism now is like having a pet rock in the 80s where everyone's like, this is what the future is going to be like. And then you look back and you're like, no, it was kind of some mystification to kind of like get you through, like, look over here, while everyone is like, accumulating or the rich are accumulating what they can.
They already
it's
live
just
on
a mini
Mars
distraction.
at this point.
you know. And so I think we need to emphasize that because, like, it redirects us to the questions that matter, right? It's not that it's not a battle over. No, you need. This is what being green really means. I mean, this is my point of view. It's the capitalism doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I think there are two. You know, maybe we want to end on a more optimistic note. There are two things. Yeah.
Yeah. Please.
Well, actually, first I want to say one more pessimistic thing, and then we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Death cult. Death
A lot
cult.
of-
Death
a lot of
cult.
people on the left are genuinely starting to ask the question if it wouldn't have been better to have right center right far right coalition instead of a coalition between the Greens and the center right, given the platform that the Greens and the center right are have agreed upon is basically extremely capitalist, gives very little by way of the conservatives give very little by way of concessions to the Greens, and it's really, really bad. I mean, there's no way a left-wing person can look at this and I mean, the best you can do is say, well,
I mean, I'm an accelerationist.
yeah,
so.
oh, yeah. There's, I mean, yeah. Forgot to talk about accelerationism. I mean, the best you can do is be like, oh, well, I am a Green voter. I admit it. This is bad, but I still am for it because, the government couldn't really have done that much because, there's currently a right-wing hegemony in the country, and there's just simply no social majority for the kind of things I wanted. So therefore, it's okay that the Greens agreed to this shit. That's not a position I necessarily agree with, but at least it has a logical coherence to it. And then there's also the, argument, well, this is bad and the Greens could have done better, so I'm not going to defend them, but it is good that the Greens are in government because they're keeping the FPÖ out. But people are starting to ask the question, like, if the Greens, here's what it comes down to. Is it better for this like racist, neoliberal platform? Is it better for racist neoliberal politics to be implemented by a racist party or a nominally left liberal one? And, I think, I mean, if the question is phrased that way, I think the answer is obviously it's better if the racists are implementing the racist politics instead of the left liberals. The one caveat is that, the one caveat there is that, the FPÖ does have some like genuinely scary characters who who do have sort of this connection with the organized far right, and that is extremely, extremely scary. And also just the issue of kind of two bad options, right? If you have the FPÖ in power, the FPÖ is so obviously like openly racist that if they're the governing party, then it normalizes their open brand of racism, kind of in the same way that Trump and his open brand of racism, really does a lot to normalize that kind of politics just by virtue of the fact of simply being president. But the Green, these left liberals implementing this racist policy also has this normalizing effect. If the Greens are saying or not contradicting the conservatives when the conservatives talk about how it's really the immigrants who are to blame for misogyny, then that normalizes xenophobia. If the Greens are implementing if the Greens are implementing budget cuts, then that normalizes neoliberalism. That deepens capitalist realism. That makes people think that there really is an alternative, if not even this nominally left formation can do anything against it. So I don't want to come down too hard. I think at the end of the day, it's probably better that the FPÖ isn't in government, but that doesn't mean that I don't feel relieved, if that makes sense. I'm not breathing a sigh of relief. Yeah. Okay, so I did say I wanted to say a couple optimistic points. So here's my optimistic reading on the situation. Trying to keep hope alive in whatever way I can. earlier I mentioned that the Greens don't really have a social base in organized labor like the SPÖ. Most of the Greens' base is relatively well off, and they're also probably going to be the people who are least hurt by the bad things, the antisocial things that the government will do. And I think a lot of them see it as the duty of the Greens to be in government just to keep the FPÖ out. So actually, in spite of what you might think, as at first glance, as leftists or Marxists or whatever, I don't necessarily think that the Greens agreeing to this coalition is going to hurt them in the next election. I think if there had, so that's my hot take. I think if there had been a coalition between, and remember, the Greens already kicked out their lefties when the Junge Grüne left. I think if there had been another grand coalition, a coalition between the SPÖ and the ÖVP, which there totally could have been. I mean, the SPÖ was still the second strongest vote getter. This would have really spelled the end for the SPÖ. The SPÖ has hemorrhaged voters over the past 2 decades, not to the center right or to the Greens necessarily, but to the far right especially. A lot of their former, industrial working class base now votes for the FPÖ, and they now vote for the far right because they see the SPÖ, they see how it's become totally neoliberal. It's accepted the neoliberal consensus. It's not, they feel like the party doesn't represent them anymore.
Exactly. It's like not talking about stuff like social reproduction, for example, topics that are now are occupied by the far right, like saying, you are in this situation, that is because of. Of course, their narratives are all like with are like kind of like ethnic talk and nationalist talk, but it's they're talking about these topics that are very much missed in like the former traditional working class parties like SPÖ and SPD.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I think like this will the current coalition government stands to hurt the total vote percentage of all parties to the nominal left of center, less than like a grand coalition would have. And if the function of the Green, so in that sense, it does buy time. It keeps the putschists, the people who are truly anti-democrats in the FPÖ away from the reins of power just a little bit longer, for there to possibly be some kind of a left-wing renewal. And to be quite honest, I never thought that left-wing renewal was going to happen in the Greens. I think that left-wing renewal will happen at some point, but I don't think the Greens, given sort of the amorphous character of their politics and their lack of institutions and their lack of a social base, I don't think they're ever going to be the vehicle for that. So this does buy some time, and I'm hoping that the left can get its act together in time to hopefully win a better future for everybody, a more livable future.
Yeah.
To anybody listening, what can maybe an Austrian listener of ours do? Like, how should they get involved if they're not already? I don't know.
They should watch nothing but his father-in-law's videos.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually want to answer that question, but we can talk about this now. I was going to joke because you had the same last name that we wanted to get Instagram star Uwe Baltner on the podcast, and then Nick was like, "I think they're related."
Yeah.
I'm like, Austria is not that small.
It's like yeah. It is.
Did you guys actually know? Oh, yeah, I'll answer the question. But did you guys actually know about him from? Did you know about him before? Like we got in touch, or
Yes.
Well, okay. I learned about him because the cool music bloggers who write about rap are clowning on him for like singing "Da Baby" in his car and whatever. And I'm like,
what?
And he responded being like, just trying to brighten people's days. And they're all like, "Fo, out of here."
Yeah, he is the most positive person on Instagram that I follow, and I really do appreciate it.
I will say, links in the show notes.
Okay,
don't worry. Like the most important link, it'll be at the top.
We'll come to this in a second.
I do really appreciate.
Your question was, what can people do? I mean, okay, so maybe this question goes out to the Austrian listeners. Well, I asked myself the same question after the the really horrible disappointment of the KPU Plus project in 2017. After my activist friends and I, were punched in the face by reality and failed to even win 1% of the electorate. I realized that there was, the party I think one of the challenges facing the KPU Plus back then was the fact that it was really just an electoral coalition, kind of a short-term thing. Really started at the last minute, and without sort of the institutional structure of a party, and without the national profile that really only I think a party can ultimately have, and kind of the sort of the institutional memory, the network of dedicated activists. Nothing was ever really going to change for the better. So I would actually encourage people to get involved in party politics, even though that might be like a lame. I mean, I know Kieran's probably like rolling his eyes right now as an anarchist in the crew. But I do think. Okay, so I think
he was actually twirling his mustache right now.
In a weird way. Time to do some illegalist stuff. Time to kill a czar.
I have a comically large bomb in my hand.
We kind of alluded to this at various points throughout the episode. The Quotes vote and we are in a strangely apolitical moment. I mean, even though everything seems to be, super right wing, I think a lot of people just don't really put that much thought into how they're voting. And the sort of the focus on individual candidates in electoral campaigns, the focus on these empty signifiers like Anstand or Menschlichkeit or whatever, and the lack of like concrete political proposals really does suggest, and it's just the focus on sort of marketing and stylization. I changed the name of the ÖVP to the Neue ÖVP Liste Kurz, reflects that we are sort of in this post-political moment. But I think I think that the idea that the party form is outdated is just post-political ideology, and I think it's wrong. So I would encourage people to get involved with party politics. I myself am a member of the KPU. There's also a new upstart left-wing party that's going to be participating in the Vienna election. It's called Links, Links. That was actually just had its founding conference last weekend. We'll see where that goes. The Vienna state, Vienna is a city, but it's also a state in Austria. So the Vienna state elections are, I believe, in September of 2020, sometime in the fall of this year. And that's, I think there's some promise there. It'll be interesting to see how it shapes up. And, there's also the Junge Linke, which, has, quite frankly, a really sharp analysis of the current conjuncture that Austria finds itself in. And a lot of, really dedicated, committed, bright young people. You can join up to age 35. So, I mean, I'm almost 29. So even I am young enough to be a Junge Linke. I would encourage people in Austria also to check out the Junge Linke. So that's like a little bit of, some plugs. Also, you should read MOSAIC if you want good left-wing analysis and newspaper. Shout out to my fellow editors at MOSAIC. And in general, even if party activism isn't, the thing where you think you're going to make your mark, if you're a political person, the least you can do is kind of talk to, family, friends, coworkers, about, in a casual, not too weird way, about maybe try to start some conversations about politics and, ask some questions about, what they think about things, and maybe you'll end up having, I think if pushed a little bit, most people can sort of have most people can sort of relate things that aren't going so well in their life to things sort of to more broader political phenomena. And once you've kind of done that with somebody, maybe that gives you a little bit of an in to do some left propagandizing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
my answer.
I appreciate that.
Those are kind of the things.
That's a good answer. Yeah, that is a good answer.
I'm just going to reiterate that while I'm swirling my large bowling ball bomb with a skull and crossbones on it. That's what I imagine illegalists are like. They're just like cartoon villains from like before films had sound. Yeah, so I strongly recommend reading MOSAIC, even if you just have Google Translate, because I read the like top 10 political moments of the last
good, right?
article that MOSAIC had. So good. That sheds so much light on this ridiculous country. Highlights for CIARÁN, obviously, we alluded to a lot. Schwarzenegger, which I still insist means black make horny. And
is that what Google Translate
everything
gave
to do
you?
with... Yes, it is what Google Translate gave me. I also, other key highlights of that article were Ava Magazine. It's so pure in its ridiculous greenness. And also
was that the one that had like the refugee of the week section or whatever it was?
Yes, and also the hit versus shit list.
I mean, it wasn't actually refugee of the week, but it was like something like
he was Australian or like right.
It was something really, really, really close to that. Though.
The other one was the Blau lady from the campaign song for the FPU from Bergenland.
Classic.
Which
I remember that.
Yeah,
I need to deep dive into all of these.
Nick, I would strongly recommend that the ending song to this podcast is Blau Lady.
Okay.
I will just add this. I think here at Corner Späti, we want to give you the Späti mindset, and a certain kind of Späti swag. And what that swag is that everyone who pretends they're right, who's smart, who's in charge about politics, not only they're wrong, they're dumb, they're probably racist, and you probably are a better person and know more than them. This is not true for, minor. I'm talking about the people who are on TV all the time, the people who are supposed to run stuff. So you don't need to have any, like, that feeling you have that, like, the world's kind of fucked up. I'm just some random person, though. They probably have it figured out. I should be more charitable in their interpretation. No, they don't have it figured out. You are right. That party in the Schwarzenegger video is not cool. Don't listen to them. You know that's a bad party.
Cool.
You know that's a bad party. And they're trying to be like, this is so cool.
Sebastian Kurz would not go to that party if he didn't have to.
Oh, yeah. We're going to save that for another podcast.
Oh my god, they had a fucking saxophone player. They had a saxophone player, and she was playing to electronic music, like techno.
Nice.
The rest of the world
wasn't that like a hit song in Europe, probably like that.
Maybe. Yeah, probably.
Oh, you mean Moldova's entry into the Eurovision?
Yeah.
Wait,
of course you're on this.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah,
but was a female like saxophone?
No, not
because normally they have guys on the saxophone. Because
this
but
was
in
a very
this case,
much
it had to be a Schwarzmacht guy, so it had to be a woman in very short.
A lot of cleavage.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. And when you listen to us, I know it can be depressing sometimes, but you know the world's fucked up, and you know that we're all, we're just a bunch of random people who
give us a 1-star review on Apple Podcasts and say how you don't like that opinion of ours.
And we have some friends in Austria
we get more
writing
famous
a
by
blog.
like bad reviews.
Oh yes, thank you so much to the Jan Fleischhauer stan that gave us like a 1-star review.
Yeah, because we called him a fascist.
That was so good.
That made our day.
all I want to say is that there's a certain freeing feeling to it.
It was what was it again? It ended in the funniest way. It was like, I can't believe you called a journalist. I can't believe what did you call him again? Yes. But then at the end it was like he's like, the left needs to be more tolerant of people who don't share their, quite frankly, insane opinion. Their insane worldview.
Dangerous
worldview. Dangerous worldview.
That was the biggest compliment I've ever gotten.
I know. We did chant
dangerous
worldview.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. I write that in my CV.
Again, like Jan Fleischhauer wishes he could live in Austria right now.
You moved to Bavaria. That's the closest you can do
That's
without
very
leaving
close
Germany.
to Austria.
But I guess
I imagine he just stands at the tip of the Alps, looking down like the Grinch, being like, "If
Soon.
only, soon."
in 5 years, in 5 years' time, I'll be able to be writing for the, I'll be able to go to my own Schwarzenegger party.
No.
If there's nothing else, 2 questions. One, where can people find you, Adam, your work, your tweets, whatever you might want to shout out? Yeah, your address.
Yeah.
Your office.
Oh, man.
And where can people find your father-in-law if they want to check out his work?
Good questions. So recently I haven't been doing much serious work or writing of any kind, but I have been wasting a lot of my precious time on Twitter. And you can find me on Twitter.
Hell yeah, me too.
Right.
You can find me on Twitter at Schau mal halt mal, which means like, let's just wait and see in Austrian dialect.
Right.
Anyway, or you can just Google, I'm on Twitter under my real name, so you could just type in my name. Or if you want to actually read things I've written, you could visit MOSAIC -blog.at. I've also written a couple of I wrote something in Jacobin a couple months ago and something in Neues Deutschland a few months before that. And one of my goals this year is to do some more of that, some explaining of Austrian politics to an English audience, and maybe explaining of German language politics to an English language audience. My father-in-law, Uwe Baltner, is an Instagram.
Yes.
You can find him on Instagram, I guess.
Yeah, he has like 1.5 million.
I think he's easier to find
than
than I
the other
am.
day.
I think he's like one of the top Instagram accounts in Germany.
That's
Yeah,
insane.
1 point. Yeah, he's.
Does he tell you who he votes for?
No, we don't want to know that. We don't want. no,
you don't have
it's
to
funny.
spoil
He
it.
actually,
You don't have to.
Off mic.
He's like really into.
Hardcore Peter Pilz fan.
He's like an OG like internet guy, and he started a personal podcast back in like 2009 or 2010, which he still has up and running. It's called so obviously everybody knows his Instagram, just Uwe Baltner, and but he has a podcast called Nettes Frettchen. Does anybody get that reference? Julia?
Nettes Frettchen.
So do you know The Big Lebowski?
No, I don't get it. Yeah.
Okay, you know when the gangsters drop the ferret in the bathtub?
Yeah.
Okay, so
fuck, yeah.
the Jeff Daniels character goes, "Nice ferret," and then the gangsters drop the ferret in the bathtub. In
Yeah.
German, apparently, it's
Yeah, oh my
Nettes
God.
Frettchen.
It sounds so funny in German.
That is the most
Oh my God,
niche
I've only-
thing I've
Yeah,
ever heard in
I've
my
only
entire
watched it
Podcast named
life.
after a
in
Big
English,
Lebowski
so-
reference. No, it's a
fuck.
it's a German podcast. So I mean, if anybody wants to listen to like
Yeah.
things about like summer vacation
Nettes
or
Frettchen.
like
Oh my God.
I don't know, his granddaughter, my daughter or something, or then just tune it. It's kind of engaging. Sometimes he talks about politics too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a
Wow.
left
Thank you.
social democrat. Pretty good politics, actually.
That's you do realize you've just planned out Rob's entire week. It's just catching up on the backlog of this podcast.
I will say I respect his art because like someone who gets that level of fame, they might need to be like, all I do is sing in my car. I should like dance. I should like make it a little, but there's discipline. Know what you're getting every post. It's singing in the car.
Good.
And honestly, I respect that.
Yeah.
What
That's
is
that,
his
that
Instagram?
it shows
I use
a
Instagram.
a faith and you believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think we can all learn something from that.
We really can. I guess on that note, discipline.
Yep.
And what else? I don't know.
Border,
that was really where I was
border.
going. That was
Shoot the Clement with the tank. What?
For all the links that Adam has mentioned here
I got
will
so
be
many
in
friends
the show notes. So make sure to check out his work. You can also look at Uwe, and also just keep an eye on Austria because oh boy,
It's the future of Germany.
it is the future of Germany.
That's-
I am fully on board with that theory.
I hope not. But
Yeah.
we all
Jan
hope
Fleischhauer
not.
is definitely hoping.
Oh
that
no, how
After
that
the next
It's
parliamentary
worked out
election,
so
there's
far.
going to be a coalition between the CDU and the Greens to keep the the second place AfD out of power. I would bet money on that.
On that note,
yes.
Thank you, Adam, for coming or calling
Thanks
in.
for having me.
And we will.
Adam has to go back to his home planet now.
The rum state of the Habsburg Empire.
Yes.
The German-speaking rum state of the
Pleasure
former
grounds.
Habsburg Empire.
And we will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye.
Ciao.